allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hold on just a minute, Tiffany.
Sure.
I can't get the for the record up. Why isn't it? There we go. Okay, go ahead.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and with routine business, consider a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, a couple corrections if we could to move some things.
Mike, if you'll
Yes.
use your microphone.
Yep, I'm actually, I'm gonna move number 3, the malt beverage license to number 1 because she has to leave right away. And then I'm moving numbers 6 and 7 up so that we have some people here from the court and like them to be able to get back to.
Okay, and my request would be to move number 12 after number 2.
Okay. With those changes, I consider a motion to approve the agenda.
I would so move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. You can call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. We move on to our consent agenda items. I'd consider a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair. I'll second.
Thank you. You can call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. We'll go ahead and move on to our opportunity for public comment. If there's people in the audience that would like to come up and speak, now would be the time to do so for items not on the agenda. Good morning. You state your name and address, please.
Betty Otten, 46787 273rd Street in T. And I know that you have the courthouse plan on the agenda, but there's no public comment, so I thought I would do it now. I think after we had our courthouse meeting, I think several of us have decided that that courthouse plan that we came up with is short-sighted. And I know that there are conceptual plans that are on the agenda today for that lease, which would all be paid for by Lincoln County. So I would just ask that there be some discussion on that before that is actually signed, because we think that it's short-sighted, number one, that the sheriff's department won't be going out there, because I think that in several years, it's not on the plans now, and we don't want it to be on the plans now, but that we are looking for a jail to come into that area, and I think that if we don't plan for the sheriffs being out there, I think we're being short-sighted. And the second thing I would ask is that anytime you have any tax increases and/or public, and/or have public, that you would have public meetings to give reasons why you want the tax increase and to get public buy-in before we go through all this stuff like we're going to do again on Tuesday. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up and speak? If not, we'll move on to commissioner reports. Any commissioners like to make a report today?
I'd just like to comment that I'd like to thank Jesse Foncourt and the Lincoln County Economic Development for their tour last Tuesday. I know that I did attend and I enjoyed it. And very informational. I know Commissioner Aaron's joined in the afternoon. And so I think that it's something that a lot of residents probably aren't aware of, all of our activities that are going on. So thank you very much to Jesse for that.
Thank you for that. Any other commissioners have a report?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to echo Commissioner Gibbon's comments. We had a great tour of Showplace Industries. You know, they make cabinets and furniture and things like that. They're located right there in Harrisburg off of Cliff Avenue. They are a large company. They currently employ 650 to 700 people right now, and they said that their major limitation right now on being able to expand is people, human capital. They cannot find enough employees, and they cannot find enough good employees. At any one time, they're looking for 30 to 40 people in order to come up to 100% capacity. And they're going through an expansion of their building right now, but they're also planning an expansion for 2 years from now. And in order to meet that, in order to fulfill that expansion that they want to do, they're going to need another, what was it, Jim, 50 to 60 employees. And they're obviously in competition with other companies, but that's their big concern right now, is where they're going to find people to work at their company. And what they also told us is that their lead time right now, or their ability to meet orders, is they're 15 weeks out, and they would like to reduce that down to 6 weeks. So definitely a growing company. There's a major demand for the service and the products. And just lastly, one interesting thing is they're an ESOP. They're an employee-owned company, which is very interesting. And they converted to an ESOP just a few years ago. So their employees own the company. And so fantastic company located in Harrisburg, and they're doing great things, but they certainly have their limitations like all other companies do right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have a report?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to tell you, last night we had a groundbreaking at the 4-H grounds, and it was well attended by several of the leaders of the association, and Wendy put together a good program. So we finally broke ground on expanding our facility, and look forward to that developed. A comment to Commissioner Aaron's, there are 7,000 jobs. If you want to put that number out, 7,000 jobs that are in the Sioux Falls metro area right now. Where those 7,000 people are going to come from is a good question. So Showplace is a credit, but I think most every employer in this area has the same problem, trying to find people, quality people to fill those. And the sad part about it is you get a pirating of one group going to another group, and so it goes. But lots of opportunity for all of us.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and go to what was item agenda 3 for a public hearing for a malt beverage license. Ms. Bowers?
There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What's planned?
Well, unfortunately, we were supposed to have this in August, and it got canceled because of the tornado. So I'm back to request our malt beverage license for the Booster Club on October 8th. So,
And where is that going to be?
it'll be at the 4-H grounds.
All right. Any of the commission members have any questions for Ms. Bowers? No? All right. Anybody here to speak in favor of the request? All right. Anybody here to speak against it? If not, I consider a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes.
Thank
There
you.
go. Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and, we'll move on to items 6 and 7 on our agenda. Mr. Golden, are you handling those?
I can start you off on this because I believe we have quite a few of the members of the courthouse committee here today. So if you have questions or other things, I believe you'd be able to get those answered. So
Sure.
we had a previous courthouse committee about a week or so ago, and I believe, well, I went ahead and did a presentation on where the negotiations were going. One of the things that I had told the courthouse committee is that the initial negotiations had shrunk the design of the building down because in order for me to negotiate a lease, it would have to fit within our budget. I think it was fair to say that there was a lot of concerns that the size of the 55,000 square feet versus the 87,000 square feet was a real concern, that it was too small, it wasn't gonna meet the needs. The sheriff had agreed that he could live in the facilities that he was, so the sheriff's office was removed from those plans. It would have to reduce the courtroom space down to 2 courtrooms. That was a concern for the court systems. It does not have all of the other facilities that the committee had looked at and decided that they were needing. And so after a lot of discussion, going down from the estimated $34 million for the courthouse, went down to approximately 26. Having heard all of this input and the concerns that the facility wasn't gonna be large enough and it wasn't going to meet the needs, really the immediate needs, and let alone the 20-year needs, went back and talked to the group that we're working with, Lincoln County Development and Darcy Johnson, and came up with the idea that we go ahead and enter into an agreement with them, that we will start designing the facility. We will pay the architects because we want access to those plans, is the idea behind it. Because until we actually draft up some plans, we can't really negotiate anything. Until we draw up plans, we can't really hand it to anyone and say, this is what our needs are, and this is the cost. Because right now, we're kind of going backwards from, here's what our needs are, and then we're coming down to what we can afford. The idea behind, if we enter into negotiations with them, have them draft up our plans, we pay for them. They're agreeing to give us the access to those plans later on, because right now we've invested approximately 9 months of a lot of people's time and effort. We paid other attorneys to come up with our needs and our space, and what we don't have is a set of plans that everybody can agree on, that this is what we need. And then after we do that, then I think it's appropriate for us to come back. And then at that point in time, have a discussion on how you pay for it. Because there was conversations about the lease, there was conversations about bonding. But without a hard and fast, this is what we need, this is what we absolutely have to have, and what's in there, and have all the stakeholders sign off on it, I really can't try to see if I can negotiate a lease for it. We can't really ask what a bond will be. And we really can't go ahead and define our needs going forward in the next 20 years. So I'm combining 5, 6, and 7 together at this point in time. But from the feedback, because that was one of the things I think was clear from the committee, was that we needed a nice, clear process, and that we needed to build a large enough facility, and then we need to define how we're going to pay for it. My instructions at this point in time was to seek out and see if we could do it on a lease, and I was operating under those terms. And I think that it was a fairly clear message that what I believed that the county was going to be able to afford on lease versus what we need are 2 separate things. So if anyone has any questions, that's a summary of what happened at the courthouse committee. And then the request for a contract in order to go out and an agreement to develop a set of plans that we can then work from. We'll still have access to in the future in case we're not able to work, and develop a plan with the Lincoln County Development Crew. We'll still have access to those plans. So the last 9 months won't have gone to a waste.
So do you want us to take action on number 7 and then table number 6?
Well, I think that there's plenty of members of the courthouse committee that may have additional feedback, or if I didn't represent all of the points of views, there may be some people that want to comment on it. I'd ask you to give them that opportunity.
Sure.
And then on that agreement, I'm going to estimate that in order to have the courthouse committee or the courthouse plans developed, the last time that we looked at doing this was on the jail. And that was estimated, I think the committee, or the commission authored $30,000 to develop those plans. And I think that that's gonna be the minimum of what it's gonna cost to develop plans for the courthouse. And the intent would be to have development of the courthouse, a phase 2, which would have the sheriff's office and potentially a jail. The plans would be present, but that doesn't mean that's what we're doing right away. But it's something to work off of and something that we would have instead of each time that we go through this process, starting at the beginning and working back forward. I'd like to go ahead and have access to those plans and have them developed so that you, sometime in the future, when you decide to make a decision on what you want to do with them, if you want to build, you have something in place instead of having to go through a year-long process to develop them. So that's what I'm requesting.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that's on the courthouse committee that would like to come up and address the board?
Good morning, Commission. Chad Skiles, 820 North Dakota Street in Ken. Just a couple of things regarding, first off, I think maybe it was misspoken. Mr. Golden said 2 courtrooms. It's 8, 6 completed, 2 just shell. So just for the record, so that the numbers are accurate there with where the committee's plan went after the last meeting. And then secondly, a number of us have had 2 weeks now, just shy of 2 weeks, to really think and process through everything that was discussed at the last committee meeting. And in talking one-on-one with several of the other committee members since then, we do feel that some of the cuts that were discussed at that meeting to try to make budgetary things work, we might be being a little too conservative with where we're headed. Because the more I look at it, the more that I study these numbers, the more I think if we go with what the current 26 million from the 34 million is, we're gonna build and move into an area that we're not gonna have enough room in. The more I think about it, I appreciate the sheriff's willingness to stay here in order to decrease the size of the Justice Center. But I don't think that that is in the best move of Lincoln County. I truly feel that the Sheriff's Department should be in and part of this new Justice Center for streamlining purposes and efficiency. The other area that I think we do need to relook for increasing the size back up again is the Public Defender's Office. And I don't want the commission or other members of the courthouse committee to feel like, well, gosh, this isn't the stuff that we discussed at our last meeting. But it's a result of, we've had 2 weeks to kind of digest all of the information that was discussed at that meeting 2 weeks ago and process it and be able to talk one-on-one and kind of analyze and break things down. And so that's where a few of us, and I think that I can say that I'm speaking for at least a few members of the Courthouse Advisory Committee. I spoke with Larry Nelson on the phone about 5 minutes before the meeting started this morning. He's on his way out to Pier. And so we're just asking the commission to, to keep those things in mind as well as we proceed forward with this, that we're not, the courthouse committee is not, we're willing to look and we're willing to negotiate and we're willing to look at other options and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the committee that would like to come up and address the board? All right. Discussion amongst the commission. What do we want to do today? Commissioner Aaron's, do you have any input?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so we had a great meeting last time of the Courthouse Improvement Committee about 2 weeks ago. And at that meeting, there was some, I guess, mediation and some give and take amongst all of the equity partners. And the consensus at that time was we will stay with the 6 courtrooms, and then we'll have a shell for 2 more that could be built out. And then, of course, the Sheriff's Department said that it would wait till later on down the road to move out there. I guess there's been some of the members of the committee have had an opportunity to digest that a little further, it sounds like. There was also some input that Dave Van Nieuwenhuis, I apologize if I'm saying Dave's name wrong, but he sent me an email last week in which, I'll kind of condense what he said, but Dave wanted us to explore the issue of a bond more. Probably in light of developments, that's a little premature at this point. Paul Paulson wanted to know what the cost is going to be. I think we all do. Larry Nelson called me this morning and said that he was in favor of the way that we would pay for this is through a combination of paying out of general funds as well as using the, I guess, how do I want to explain it? We have a bond on this courthouse right now, or on this facility that we're sitting in. And this facility's bond is up when, Sherry?
2026.
2026, and we're going to attempt to refinance that bond on this building as well, which would put it just
I think
lower.
it's still gonna be at 2026. I'll have to wait till I talk to
Tom?
Tom.
It would
But
just
I
lower
think
the
it's gonna
cost.
lower the payments, so.
So the thinking of the committee
Or the
members is that we would use a combination of general funds, 600,000 approximately, and then we would finance $400,000 of that. And in order to make it we were looking at it from the standpoint of not only providing services, but from a taxpayer-centric perspective of how do we do this without raising your taxes? And we thought that the way to accomplish that is just to, when the bond runs out on this building, we will do another bond for the new courthouse in the amount of about $400,000, and then it would keep your taxes at about the same level. So you could accomplish the building of a $28 million facility without having to raise your property taxes. We needed more exploration of that topic, though, but that was the general concept of how to pay for it. I think that's a little premature right now, though, from what I'm hearing, because what I'm hearing from Bill right now is what he wants this commission to do today is to authorize State's Attorney's Office or us to enter into an agreement with an architect so we can draw up plans and get more detailed information as to what it's going to cost, what it's going to look like, right?
Yes, the agreement would be with the Lincoln County Development Company, that they have an architect they're working with, and they started on working on the plans, that we would, at that point, enter in, develop those plans, get all the stakeholders to sign off on it, that we would pay for those designs, so that if we move forward with Lincoln County Development, or if we move forward with somebody else, we would still have access to those plans, and we wouldn't have to go back to the beginning and design something.
Yeah, and so I can support that. That's putting the horse in front of the cart and doing it in the right order. And so I think what we do here today is we, I would just use Arc Inc. because they've already been working on it. They know the plans. We don't have to recreate the wheel. I mean, I'm open to other suggestions, but they've already been working on it. I've got no skin in the game, but I would just suggest them as the architect we use, since they've been to over 18 hours of meetings with us now, and they know the insides and outs of what we're looking for. I would say that we engage them, we have them draw up plans, and then we can always, once they develop the plans, we can always meet again to take another look at them. We're not voting for a courthouse today. We're not voting to raise taxes. We're not voting for any kind of finance mechanism. We're just simply doing the logical next step of what you do when you enter into a big building process like this, which is let's draw up the plans, let's get it taken care of. We need the plans anyway in order to determine what the price is going to be.
I had submitted, I believe, agreement that I'd worked out with the Lincoln County Development Program, so it should be attached.
I have that MOU. Has everybody had a chance to read the MOU that's proposed?
The intention is that the Lincoln County Development Group wants to engage the architect because if we're talking to them about potentially building or leasing, they would like to have control of the expense and costs going forward. They want to employ the architect. But the agreement allows us to have access to those plans regardless. So we wouldn't be dictating who it is. They could hire whoever they choose, but at that point, we would just have access to it so that we don't put the time, money, and effort into it and then have to start at ground zero again. But this is what, from our conversations, where we were at and the best we could do, because it's really hard to price something that we don't know what it's going to be.
You know, I'm okay with that, but the question comes, how do we implement appropriate, cost control then with the architects?
Well, because we set a budget and that we will tell them that this is what it's going to be. And
Okay.
I mean, at this point in time, both sides are entering into no man's land, which is we don't know what those costs are fully going to be. We know what we had budgeted last time around. I can go ahead and make it very clear to them that we want, that we're going to request that they send vouchers into us and that they not exceed what's been authorized and don't do any work without us requesting it. One of the things that both sides have asked for in this is that Alan Walsh will be the contact person for them. So I have one person to talk to. Our office, State's Attorney's Office, will be the contact, and then we'll be responsible for communicating with everybody in between so that that was one of the control costs we had, because if we just let everybody have access to the architects, we'll have multiple sets of plans.
You'll also have multiple billings for their
Yes.
time.
So it is my intention that if something is not communicated or it doesn't get to the right people, you're going to have either myself or Alan Walsh to blame for this, because we're the ones who's supposed to be communicating the information. So,
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Weldon?
I just have a question, and I don't disagree with you, Commissioner Aaron's, but selecting an architect, are we obligated to open that up and allow for competing firms to put a price, or want to participate in this? Or don't we have to because of the size of the expenditure?
Well, we don't have to for two reasons, right? Number one is it's professional services, and we're not required to bid out professional services, number one. But number two, we're not hiring the architect.
correct.
A private independent entity is hiring the architect, and we're just paying the bill.
So Lincoln County Development could choose anybody they want?
Yes, it's up to them.
Correct.
That's entirely up to them?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Golden? If not, I'd consider a motion to approve the MOU.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a couple things. In 9 months, they've come to a point where we're still not sure what it is that we need to build. We don't know how we're gonna pay for it. Initially, I thought we were under the understanding we were trying to figure out how to pay for this within our budget, but that has now seemed to have changed. I think we need to address how we're paying for it so we know what the budget is to build. Because the last thing, as I agree with Mr. Skiles, is let's not cut ourselves off today. We did that back in 2006, 7, when we were building this facility, and to save some money, they took off the ability to expand the structure. So the idea of not moving the sheriff over there and leaving him here only compounds the issues that we have in this facility. So ultimately, we need to do it right, and we need to know that how we're gonna pay for it, because I do not believe that what our true needs are gonna be able to be done within our existing budget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, just a comment. I agree with Betty on this situation. I think that when we do this, we have to develop some kind of mechanism to inform the public on a better way than what we have been as to what this county needs and this county can afford, so that you bring together some kind of consensus on the part of the whole group so that they understand this. And right now, Commission, we do a miserable job on explaining anything to the public on what we intend to do. And because of that, we have individuals that question our decisions. We have our ability to convey to them the logic behind this. So in this whole process, because it's step by step, I hope we can develop some kind of mechanism as well as to get the information to the public, regardless if they live in Hudson or they live in Sioux Falls, so that people truly understand where we are at the crossroads and how critical this is to the future. I mean, and I don't, if Commissioner Poppins, if we are unable to afford and we go to the public and we ask them for additional tax revenue, that they understand that it's just something that is necessary for us to carry on good government. That's my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Sheriff Swenson, do you have any objection to moving out there if you were told to?
Absolutely not. And just so everybody understands the context of where that all started from, Bill and I were meeting about what the budget, a current budget could afford, and what different options we could move to be able to afford to get the courts where they need to be. And that option was either leave the state's attorney's office here or my office here. And I just think the state's attorney's office would be the first priority for a court system. So I said, let's chop my office out, and just in a way to be able to afford to move forward. So either or, whatever the taxpayers can stomach, I can live with.
You were making a preemptory concession in order to get the project off the ground.
Yes.
Yeah,
Same
of
reason I
course.
haven't built a pool. So,
That's what we do in our daily lives. It's what we do in government, right? We make concessions in order to get things off the ground. There's certain sacrifices, right, that we do for the greater good. So I'm hearing that there's consensus on what the project is going to look like then, because essentially we're back to Plan A, which had the full support and consensus of the board as well as the sheriff's office. So I don't think that's at issue anymore, unless someone else wants to speak up and say otherwise.
Any of the other commissioners have anything they'd like to add before we call a vote? If not, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Reluctantly, yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. Motion carries. Did you want?
After this one, having 6 or 12 come up to there.
You want 12 first?
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all on that.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and jump back up to number 1 with Summit Carbon Solutions presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you.
Dan Lederman, I'm with Summit Carbon Solutions today, just giving a briefing to the county commission about a proposed project that would come through Lincoln County. It's a carbon capture project. It, if completed, would be the largest carbon capture project in the world. It's a $4.5 billion project that would encompass 5 different states and 31 ethanol plants. There have been contracts signed with 7 of those ethanol plants are in South Dakota. And what the project hopes to do is capture the carbon coming from the emissions of the ethanol plants, compress it, put it in a pipeline, and have it travel to North Dakota, where it would be terminated into, it would have the terminus there in North Dakota, where it would be piped 5,000 feet into the ground, into a geological formation. The project is being proposed by a group called Summit Agricultural Group out of Iowa. It is led by Martha Wersch, who was appointed by President Bush under President Bush for the Department of Transportation, and under President Obama for Environmental Protection Services, and Governor Terry Branstad of Iowa, among other members of the Summit Agricultural Group. The project in the stages that we're looking at is just in the beginning stages. You, as commissioners, might have been contacted by some landowners who have received letters from land agents to discuss the acquisition of easements. In the process that we're looking at, it's a 3-year plan where right now we're talking with local government officials, we're talking with landowners. The permitting process, which would encompass federal, state, and local permits, would start in 2022, with construction hopefully starting in 2023, and hopefully having the project up and running by 2024. If completed, we would be looking at transporting 12 metric tons, 12 million metric tons of carbon each year. That's equivalent to about 2.6 million cars. So we're removing carbon that would normally be going out into the atmosphere by capturing it at the site of the ethanol plant and then transporting it through pipelines. Condensing and compressing carbon is not a new process. This has been going on for decades, and storage by ethanol plants has been going on since the 90s. And currently in the U.S., there's about 5,000 carbon pipelines operating at this time. When completed, this project would have about 2,000 miles of total pipeline, and that's because you have the main trunk that would attach the 5 states, Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, and Nebraska. But you would also have smaller diameter pipes that would then connect to the ethanol plants and bring it to the main trunk. So right now, the company just wants to get out in front of this and make sure that they've talked to the local officials. We've already had discussions with state level officials, and we're looking at meeting with landowners in a series of public open houses that will be set up this quarter. And we also invite our commissioners and local government officials to those as well to learn more about the project. And like I said, this is a briefing just to get this on your radar and to answer any questions that you have, and provide a way for you to know more about the project. With that, I will open it up for questions and stand by.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Dan, this pipeline, usually pipelines are extremely controversial because of their potential for leakage and things. This seems to be a pretty benign pipeline. It's underground and pumps this carbon to where its intended purpose.
I think
Is there stations along the way, like a normal one or anything like that?
so there's an alert system along the pipeline route that would alert the company, so the engineers and the safety teams would be able to address any type of leaks or problems. In the past, when Lincoln County's worked with pipeline companies, Harold Timmerman, your emergency manager, has been very active in understanding what's going on with the pipeline and how to work with the company to address any spills or leaks. In this situation, it's a gas that's compressed into a liquid, but if it leaks, it turns back into a gas. It's not flammable, it's not toxic. We have carbon dioxide in the air right now, but it does displace oxygen. And that's the worst thing, is that it takes away the space where oxygen would exist. So obviously, there's a big safety concern, but the company is making sure that everything is done with the most latest advancements in technology and the most reliable systems. Along the way, there are checkpoints and valves that are able to shut down and keep the carbon dioxide from being released. There will be signage that will be posted, not in the middle of fields, but at all the different crossings and at the at lot lines. So anybody who is out hunting and crossing a row would be able to see that there's a pipeline under the ground. The depth of the pipe would be 3 feet in agricultural areas. So let's say you're in an area that's not being used for tilling fields or any other purposes. The top of the pipe to the top of the earth would be 3 feet. If it's in an agricultural area where you might have drain tile or you might have agricultural uses going on, that would be 4 feet from the soil to the top of the pipe. If there's drain tile, the drain tile would have a 12-inch separation. So usually the pipe would go under the drain tile, but in a situation where the drain tile is at that depth, they would go above the drain tile. The company is committed to working with all landowners on replacing tile and also making sure that the land is remediated to the way it was before.
What's the size of the pipe?
The smaller diameters, 4 inches, those would be the feeder pipes that would be coming from the ethanol plants. And the largest diameter would be 24 inches. So much smaller than some of the more recent pipeline projects that have come through.
Dan, 2 questions. Will the ethanol plants we have here in Lincoln County be participating?
The 7 ethanol plants, 4 of them are glacial lakes. No, to answer your question directly, no. The closest that we have, I believe, is either Redfield Energy or Redfield or Dakota Energy. And then the other company, I'd have to check my list, but it's Glacial Lakes, Ring Neck, Redfield, and Dakota Energy. And I think the closest one is just north of here in a couple counties north of Lincoln County.
But, and then second question is, the trunk line would run through Lincoln County, though?
Yes, and this is from my discussions with a lot of landowners along the route and local officials. It appears that it's traveling very close to or right on the easement that Dakota Access Pipeline has already laid out. So I can't say specifically where it is because we don't have a map yet. A lot of the easements, easement acquisition hasn't even started yet, or at least they haven't been signed by landowners. But I would guess that it would come in where Dakota Access comes in from Iowa and travel through the county in the same route.
Yeah, we recently toured Dakota Access Pipeline, and Harold Timmermans was there. That was last week, Thursday. And just for the benefit of the public and the other commissioners that may not have had a chance, significant number of pipelines that run through Lincoln County. There's actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually a corridor for a number of pipelines that run through our county. And so I think what I'm hearing is this is just kind of the logical progression of that. There's this corridor, and a lot of the pipelines like to use that corridor. So.
And I don't understand what the logic is completely behind it. I know that when Dakota Access was laid, they took into a lot of different factors, everything from where there might be geological or archaeological finds to, there's a lot of different factors and data points that are put into laying out the path to not interfere with either future growth or other transmissions. So I know that with the pipeline that goes through currently, it ended up getting a pump station, and that's what the tour was about, was the pump station that was recently added, yeah.
Dan, how close will you be coming to municipalities with this pipeline?
The route's not set yet, but if it stays with the DAPL route, we had a jog around Sioux Falls. I know that they stayed pretty clear of Harrisburg and their future growth areas. I know during that build-out, Sioux Falls and Harrisburg were consulted, and they actually changed the route of the pipeline to accommodate for their future growth areas and for development that was along the interstate. I expect that same process to take place with this one too.
So the possible route, excuse me, might be from Iowa into Lincoln County.
And it exits, the proposed route, I know exits McPherson County. I talked to one legislator who actually is a landowner who had sold an easement to go to access, and he said that same route was being used to exit, and that's where it would leave the state of South Dakota. As we get closer, even as early as next month, those routes will be available, because when we do public open houses for the landowners and for local government officials, they'll bring displays and be able to show where the route is being proposed.
3 feet doesn't seem very deep to me.
And I think in undisturbed areas where there's no expectation of it being disturbed, any growth or any type of actual movement. And I'm not a pipeline expert, but FSMA, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials group under the Department of Transportation, they regulate what the depths are. They regulate the pipe width and thickness. So the agencies that will be overseeing this are Department of Transportation for the siting and for the safety of the pipeline, and then the storing of the carbon would be under the EPA rules. EPA has already approved underground geological formation storage, and they would be the ones who would permit the storage areas in North Dakota.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
We'll talk later. Thank you.
Move on to item 2 on our agenda. Good morning.
Good morning, John Lawler, Mayor for the City of T. Just want to have a brief discussion with you this morning regarding ARPA funds. And I guess before we get started, I really feel for you as a group, as you have many projects you're looking at, and then you have money from the federal government that is allocated to you and limited uses of what you can actually use that money for. Like I said, there's a lot of things you guys have going on that money could be allocated to, but the criteria for this particular pot of money doesn't allow you to use it for things you really need to do. With that being said, I just wanted to find out from the commission if you've had discussions, any formal discussions about what's your intent to try to use those monies for. I know there's all the communities within the Lincoln County have different infrastructure needs as far as water and sewer projects. I just wanted to let you know that when you do get to a point when you do want to have conversations, or you think about how to make use of those funds and take in turn money that's been given to you and turn those into opportunities for the county to grow your tax base, that we're ready to talk. Whether it's having a list of projects that we have basically shovel ready, or just getting an application process down or a concept on it, we're here, we're wanting to visit when you get to that point. So like I said, don't know whether you have addressed it much yourselves internally, but again, just wanted to let you know from the standpoint of the City of T, we do have projects that if you want to look at going outside the county or the municipalities within the county, that we do have projects that we could use that for.
Thank you,
With
appreciate
that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Your comments are well taken, and you're right, those funds are very limited on what we can do with them, at least as of now.
Right now,
So-
sure.
John, how your projects, are they a ways away, or are they pending, or are they already here?
So we always have a list, Jim, as far as, our projects we have going going to happen. You know, right now, as we build in our 2022 budget, that's been finalized with our meeting last week on there. We have projects that we're waiting to see where we end up at the end of the year as far as sales tax revenue coming in, as far as what we're going to take on. We have money allocated to at least do one of them. The other ones are all, I mean, we basically have 4 infrastructure projects that we know need to be done as we expand, you know, mainly our sewer services out, you know, to the west, to the north, and to the south.
Thank you.
Appreciate
John,
your.
there's been, I've had a number of discussions with Larry Nelson about this, and Larry has told me that, and I've kind of dug into this myself, that state of South Dakota is concerned about the fact that there's very limited usage on the part of counties on how how the money can be used. Sewer, water, broadband, COVID mitigation. That's basically the limitation. And so they are starting some kind of discussion to find out on the permissibility of county entities to determine if we could swap funds. For example, if Lincoln County gives you $2 million out of the $11 million we have, is it permissible, this is just the theoretical discussion right now, is it permissible for us to recapture 90 cents of every dollar back from you? So it's a way to monetize, to find out if it's permissible to monetize COVID funds. They don't have an answer yet. They're trying to figure it out. It's essentially creating a COVID bank, if you will. All these counties have all this money. Cities want to get their hands on it. Is there a way that, you know, the county can get some value for it, but also the cities as well, or the entity we would hand it out to? Because, for example, you asked what kind of discussions we've had. City of Canton has, you know, got a water project they'd like to get some funds for. And when we had those, you know, I sat in on that meeting, the first thing I said is, have you gone to the state water board yet? And their answer was no. And so I think it's gonna be important for any kind of applicant for these funds to the county to kind of say to themselves, we've got to go to multiple sources. You know, can we go to the state water board? Because they have grants, they have low interest loans. We've got $11 million here. You know, I think we wanted to use it on our courthouse. We're limited on what we can do though. Sewer, water, and broadband, that, you know, there may be, what, $500,000 in those 3 things going into the courthouse. But you might want to look into this, as Larry told me, there's significant discussion at the state level to see what the permissibility is of, you know, giving the funds to municipalities, but it wouldn't be free. There'd have to be some kind of bargain for,
Joel,
you know.
did Mr. Nelson indicate from the state who he had been speaking with?
Well, he said there was a discussion with Hunter Roberts at Department of Agriculture. I don't know how formal that is, though, but that's something to look into, I think.
Yeah, a few conversations, if I may, communications I've had with state legislators, it doesn't seem like that is going to be an option. Several reasons, just the appearance of inappropriateness and things, not saying that it won't happen. But the point that I want to say is we are sitting on this funds, and we should make a plan as to how we will distribute it. You know, at least so municipalities, entities like South Lincoln Water, North Lincoln Water, who could utilize those funds, could maybe start planning for that, so.
Yeah, I guess, Commissioner Aaron's, for your comments on it, you know, with every project we do, we're looking at state funds, whether it's SRF or whatever the options are, you know, out there. You know, we explore every option with it. What I'm saying here today is when you guys are ready to talk, we want to talk. As far as any type of money coming back, kind of depends on what it is, 90 cents on the dollar, depends what kind of control, or regulations you have in there. It's our understanding that the state, from everything we have heard so far, and Dan, our city administrator, is with me. He's been in regular contact with the state as far as getting our first allocation, on the ARPA funds, let alone the ARP funds in there. But, our understanding is the state's really taking a hands off on the ARPA part of it, where they don't really want to be the compliance people out there. They're going to be involved in the second round, but on the first round, they're kind of hands off. But we'll see if that changes. Like I said, the main thing here today is just to let you know we're interested in talking. Like I said, I know other communities have projects too. We just want to let you know where we're at, and if you decide to do something with them, we would like to talk. So,
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
We had moved item 12 up after this, the tabled item from August 10th. So Sherry or Mike, you wanted that moved. Who wants to handle that?
Well, Sherry, you could list off who had applied for the record, but I'd taken the opportunity, I visited with Commissioner Gibbon about this to place it on the agenda so that we can maybe move forward with picking the individual or the entity that's going to help us liquidate the property. There's some questions as to, there has an informal discussion about possibly trying to preserve the low area of this for water retention for the future, because once it goes into the public sector hand, it's back out of control. I do believe there's some interest from the municipality of T to work with us at acquiring that if we would be so inclined. I would encourage us to seriously look at that. And then there may be options on what is remaining on the property for easy development to be sold either as a whole or possibly in subsections as well. But I think it's the time and place to get into a contract with someone to help us work through that. So.
And we did receive the proposals, 3 proposals, one from NAI, Sioux Falls, one from Bender Commercial, and one from Joel Westra.
Commissioner Gibbon, your thoughts? I would yield first to you.
I guess I'm okay with any of the 3 that are listed there. I know that they've all put in bids. I've looked at all of them. I shouldn't say really bids, but proposals. And I guess it's probably time that we decide one way or another what direction we want to go with this property.
If there's, I liked what the initial individual or company did for us, so if there's not an objection, I would move that we contract with NAI again to liquidate the property.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. Motion carries. We're gonna move back to our public hearing for resolution of Lincoln County approving preliminary subdivision plan of Peters Addition, location and parcel ID 100.50.73.
Madam Chair, if I could interrupt you just for 1
.2021.
second, I apologize. I did want to happen to mention a happy birthday to somebody. John, happy birthday. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Madam Chair. Sorry for that.
Nope, you're fine. Toby, we're gonna handle this.
Sure. Sure, you want to read the...
Sure. Let me find it. I'm not as efficient as Sean.
Welcome back, Toby.
Thank you.
So which one does he read off of, Toby?
You can just read the heading off the agenda.
For resolution of Lincoln County approving the preliminary subdivision plan of Peters Addition, location parcel ID 15073/2021.
Good morning. This is an application for a preliminary subdivision plan. The applicant landowner is Richard Peters. This property is approximately 2 miles west of the city of T, As you can see, the property is currently zoned rural residential. I'll make mention of the property to the east. That is currently what we'll call the Spielman Edition. Staff is working with that landowner to develop a preliminary subdivision plan as well. So some of this application before you today corresponds with that future application there. Parcel size is approximately 12 acres in size. The applicant has submitted application again for the preliminary subdivision plan. If you reference the staff report that I gave you in the packet, that was during the approval for the Planning Commission. Since that time, staff has worked with the applicant and resolved and received all required submittals for this. Again, the applicant is requesting to subdivide the property into 12 lots for rural residential development. As you can see, this property, if you're looking towards the west, there would actually be the north side of the property. But the other part of this, as I was going to mention, is on the previous map, it says that it abuts Highway 17. As you're aware, the county did receive a transfer of that road, so this road directly adjacent to the property is a county road. So Terry Floyd and myself worked with the applicant to identify ways that we could minimize the amount of access onto the county road. The result is the creation of this main access into the property, and then this access point will connect to the future subdivision to the east, which will be the Spielman Edition. So again, as resolved, and this is an updated preliminary plan, the application does meet all the requirements for approval. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this unanimously. This application, I'll also make note, this application was originally scheduled for this time last month, but due to some publication errors with one of our legal newspapers, we had to postpone this application. So do apologize to the applicant for that. It's prevented them from moving forward with this application. But as required, this does meet all requirements of the county. The next step of this, as I've discussed with the applicant, is they are required to submit final development plans. Those will be reviewed by county staff and our consultants. So at this stage, they're requesting approval of this preliminary plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? If not, would the applicant come up if they're present? Good morning. Will you just state your name and address, please?
Morning, Richard Peters, 27228 South Dakota Highway 17, T.
Anything in addition that you need us to know today?
Not really. As I'm listening to what you come ahead, I'm thinking, yeah, we are trying to put this together so we can build more tax base for this Justice Center.
Sure. I like to hear that. What,
Well
any of the commission have any questions for Mr. Peters? If not, is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? All right, anybody here to speak against it? All right, I'd consider a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, we call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aaron's?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another step?
Move on to approval, consider a motion to approve a purchase of a command post trailer. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so back in February, we were working on our Homeland Security project for this year. What we came up with is that we were in need of a command post trailer. February, I don't know, 10th or something, we received a GSA bid from Great Dane for $79,500. We were approved for $78,600 to purchase the trailer. The rest was budgeted for. However, due to COVID, is what I'm being told, 7 months later, that trailer went to $107,000. And again, it's a GSA bid, so but he said it's just, they can't get any help, they can't get any parts, stuff has gone up due to inflation. So I reached back out to Homeland Security when they released the 78,600, and they've offered up 14,000 more, which would be the county's expense will be $14,800 for this $107,000 trailer. So I'm asking for approval to move forward with that. And this won't require a budget supplement. We've received grants for radars, our PBTs, some cameras, so I have the money there. It's just I had originally budgeted $2,000 for transportation and the difference that Homeland Security was offering.
Can any of those ARPA funds or any of those COVID funds be used for that, Steve? I mean, if it's emergencies or stuff, I mean, I know you need one. So,
I don't know if we could make it COVID related. Just so you guys know, this trailer will be our mobile dispatch center as well with our new dispatch equipment. We can, for instance, the tornado, say it hits this courthouse, we could immediately move our dispatch center into that trailer, and it would be operational anywhere in the county.
Forgive my ignorance here, but what is the approximate size? And then how do you use it? I guess,
Is this light on? I have no idea how this thing works.
Lay down.
Okay, so this is try to give you some example, I printed off here, but it's a 24-foot trailer with a generator. And then it would have, try to explain, this would be your dispatch console. Right here is the countertop, place for people to come and go. And these things are used like if there's a SWAT call out, a hostage situation, a tornado, anything that we would need to have a place for people to come meet and work out of on the location. And then this one, generator, I think thought I printed a picture of it's called a front office trailer. Then and it's hard to see, but it's in front here. This is where staff could meet, the incident commander and the deputies would be able to meet, and the front part of that is hopefully that's answered some of your questions.
where would you keep it? I mean,
We'd either keep it at the DOT shop or the garage in Harrisburg, but it would have to be kept in a secure place.
so like if we had it 4.5 weeks ago when we had the storm, would you utilized it, and how would you made mention of a tornado?
Right, it would have been great to use in Lennox to set up to meet with, whether it be the street crews. You know, the storm didn't hit hard enough that would have been used very long. But when you get there and you have 20 cars or your emergency manager, the sheriff, the chief of police can all meet and coordinate if you would have your search and rescue type things that you would be able to block that off. But it's the biggest thing is it's required to have a command post if you use the SWAT call out. So if we call it the Sioux Falls SWAT team, we currently designate a car. So if you try to get 4 SWAT members into a patrol car and then the incident commander, it's virtually impossible. Your
So
standard.
you kind of use a command car now? I mean, so to
Right,
speak.
right.
Thank you.
Yes,
You're able to pull this with the existing pickups we have?
correct.
And
We would probably go get it with Harold's pickup just because of the distance, but our current vehicles would pull it.
Okay. And then are you gonna need more money to install any electronic equipment in it? Or
No.
does that come with it?
No, the most of the equipment that we would need for it, we have, which we purchased with Homeland Security money. And that kind of stuff is easily obtained through Homeland Security money. So the next project, if we do anything with that, we would submit it with our Homeland Security project. Some upkeep, there's gonna be some expenses to us.
Thank you. You've heard the request. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve purchase of a command post trailer.
second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, we call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Motion carries. At this time, I'm gonna ask for an executive session, and that is going to be under SDCL 125-2 sub 1, and also, SDCL 125-2 sub 4. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved, Madam Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. Will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes, we'll be in executive session.
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes.
Good
Morning,
morning.
Julia.
Just one item for you this morning, and that's to approve the sick leave assistance application number 2006.
Second.
Thank you. Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Aaron's? Yes. Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Board action for appraisal and sale of the transfer station surplus equipment.
Yep, I put the notice in there for all the items that are listed to be sold on from the transfer station. So what I'm gonna need is, I'm gonna need 3 people to do the appraisal, when I think John Hanson probably should be one of them. And then I'll need authorization to advertise for sealed bids.
All right, so who wants to be on the appraisal committee with John Hanson? We have to have 2 commissioners?
You need 2 landowners, it doesn't have to be commissioners.
Okay.
So you could do Rombo, Hanson, and a commissioner if you want.
I think Rombo and Hanson makes sense. Does anybody else want to be part of that?
I'll volunteer.
There you go.
Commissioner Schmidt?
I would move that those 3 individuals represent the appraisal committee.
And with the advertising, that it,
With advertising there to follow.
Second.
Thank you.
thank you.
Commissioner Aaron's?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Sherry, do you want to, we could start on our budget presentation if you want, or we can recess till 11. What are the thoughts of the board?
Move on.
All right, we'll move on with
Let
our
me-
second.
Let me get Franny in here.
Hey, I got a question for you. So we're doing the Purple Heart Medal ceremony at the same time as the public meeting for the 5-year plan?
We are.
does
What
that work?
happened is in July, you scheduled the appointment, or you scheduled the time for the Purple Heart, and then nobody was aware that there was that, and then Terry's thing at 11 o'clock. So I've talked to Terry and Susan, and we were gonna do Susan's thing first, and then Terry's, because Terry's might be a little longer. I'm gonna try to come up with a solution so that doesn't happen again.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. So we'll move on to our second public hearing for the 2022 budget. Sherry, you want to tee this off for us? Okay, so I have, I didn't advertise them, but I put on our website the changes that we had talked about during the first public hearing. We re-advertised the budget in its entirety with the changes in there. The only other thing that I have been talking to the state's auditor regarding the road and bridge levy, and since we're currently under a election for it, he said that it would be advised to remove it from the budget. The only change that has to the budget is the cash applied under the highway and the bridge fund, road and bridge fund. That just changes the cash applied to the 920,805. So other than that, I don't know what other,
if you want to look at any other changes, or if we're comfortable with where we ended up with the cash applied for the, after the changes were made. Any other questions?
Sherry, on the one that says road and bridge levy deleted, where's the cash applied at?
If you look under, on the second page, cash applied under road and bridge fund, you'll see that it went from 1 million to 928,005.
$1 million to what again?
928,005.
Why am I not seeing this? Maybe I'm not looking at the right thing. Oh, all right. Thank you.
And the only reason it changes the cash applied is because of that 5% that they want you to hold out for appropriations.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Sherry?
So Sherry, I'm looking at that, so the total cash applied, you actually have to add up all of those columns going from left to right then?
No,
No,
nope, the cash applied is for its own individual fund. So the 4.2 is just the general fund cash applied. If you're looking at the one without the road and bridge, the 920 is just the road and bridge applied, and so on and so forth.
so there's no more than 4.2 million applied. That's the total amount of cash applied,
In the general fund.
right? But then there's more cash applied in the other columns, right?
In their own funds, yep.
In their own funds.
Yep, every fund has its own cash balance.
So then you have to add 4.2 to 920 to 150 and so on and so forth going across to get the total cash applied countywide, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay, all right.
So then what is the total cash applied, Sherry? Do you have that?
So if, and are we gonna work off the one without the road and bridge levy then?
Yep.
Okay. Just so that I make sure I'm on the right one. So your total cash applied over all funds is 5,406,668.
And is that lower than last year's total cash applied?
It would have to be because I think that was close to what the general fund's cash applied was alone.
Okay, that was my recollection as
Yep.
well.
So does that mean we're deficit spending 5,406,000?
It means that we're applying cash of our balance to make the budget work. We have the cash in the checking account. We just have to use that cash that's there to make the budget balance.
Right, so if there's a little over 9 million there, you subtract the 5, and we've still got 4 million and change left.
If you use the current numbers.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because there may be more that comes in based upon,
And there's more budget that's gonna go out.
correct,
Yep.
yeah.
Joe, maybe you can answer this. You've worked on the committee for a while now. Given that we're still deficit spending, how in our future budgets do we actually, or to what extent do you think we truly can fund any expansion or improvement into our court systems? Was it 26 million, or what was the thought that the max that we could do if we somehow shaved or manipulated our future budgets to pay for that?
What we discussed at the meeting and what we were working off of, and Bill can explain this as well, is that we wanted to use $600,000 per year out of the general operating fund to pay for debt service on it, and then we would finance the other $400,000. because again, the working estimate was that a $28 million facility would require $1 million of debt service per year for 30 years. Those are rough numbers, just rough numbers that the group seemed to coalesce around as a planning factor. So where the 600,000 comes from within the budget was not within the scope of the courthouse improvement committee's work. You know, we didn't break open the budget books. That was, the committee determined that that was a decision to make for the commission, not for the committee itself. But that was the planning factor, and I think that's what the state's attorney's office was using as a planning factor as well, was 600,000.
And then the 400, you were thinking a general obligation bond?
We were thinking a combination of factors. The group wanted to explore the use of ARP funds in order to cut the $28 million down. So for example, just as an example, if sewer, water, and broadband were going to cost $500,000, that would cut your cost down to 27.5. And then from there, the rest would have to be financed. And because of the timing and sequencing of the courthouse, it is generally presumed right now that we would not, if we gave the go order to the Lincoln County Corporation, it would take 3 years from today before we would be handed the building and be responsible for making a lease payment. So that would bring us to 2025, approximately, is when the first lease payment would be due, sometime in 2025. Well, in 2026 is when the general obligation bonds expire or are paid off on this facility. So the thinking was that a proposal could be made to taxpayers telling them that we can build a courthouse with no increase in taxes if you, and I know Sherry's not gonna like it when I say this, continue.
Oh, she's not the only one that doesn't like it.
No,
so.
I'm just explaining the proposal, that's all. I'm just explaining the thinking. I'm not advocating for or against it at this point. Essentially, a new general obligation bond would have to be issued to finance the other 400,000. That was the thinking of the committee. And then that way, that would be no net increase to the taxpayer, because you would just bootstrap off the current spending level for the current general obligation bond that funds this facility.
So, Commissioner, the $600,000 would be carved out of the budget each and every year, correct?
That's correct. You'd have
Okay.
to find places within the
Yeah.
existing, you know, our budget last year was $33 million. The proposal for this year is $38 million. You would have to find your 600,000 from within that money.
Of a budget that we, for the general fund, already using $4.2 million of reserves to just balance this budget. I'm gonna have to go again, reiterate, I don't know how we're going to, in 2025, when we're, utilizing our cash reserves, I don't know that we have an unlimited number of cash reserves to a point where we can even maintain this budget without assistance of the taxpayers or substantial cuts. So the idea that we're gonna be able to find 600,000 in 2025 seems a little optimistic, but.
Well, hard choices have to be made.
There will have to be hard choices.
And we're facing a fiscal cliff. We will be out of cash after next year.
Correct.
No, after 2 years.
2 years.
We have a fiscal cliff. And, there's a number of options. A, cut the budget by $5 million. B, raise taxes, which I'm opposed to. Or C, a combination thereof. And Some services may have to be cut. Some services may not be as valuable to taxpayers as what others think. I don't know. Some services, just because they exist, doesn't mean maybe they should into the future. Those are all discussions we're gonna have to have.
I think that's something we should be talking about now, because 2 years from now is not that long. So the taxpayers should have an understanding, because they do want to have transparency as to what those cuts may be and an alternative to funding, because if we need to find additional funding, it's a delayed process. We, inform the public of the additional funding. We go through the process of educating them on that, but we still wouldn't receive it. Sure, a delayed process on different mechanisms, year to 2 year before we'd actually have those to be utilized in our budget. So I think it is appropriate that we may need to have those conversations now, given that it takes time to replenish funds that are going to be disappearing, so.
I concur, Commissioner Poppins. That's probably why I'm not supporting the budget as is this year.
So what I'd like to hear, because we need to get this done, is what additional cuts is any particular commissioner proposing today?
Well, I don't have the votes in order to pass the budget the way I want to, so,
I would like to hear how you would, what
Well, so
you
would I.
I would do an across-the-board cut.
Of what?
It's across the board of everything.
Of what percentage? 10%, 50%?
Whatever it takes us to get to, look, I'm not gonna support a budget, and I have not supported a budget over $4 million. We're $4 million or $5 million over. And we've been doing that for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm not gonna support that. So the services I'd cut are across the board. You gotta cut the budget across the board in order to make this work.
So Sherry, of
Madam
our
Chair?
total cash applied, the $5.4 million, what percentage would need to be made across the board
To get it under 4 million?
to get it to zero?
Oh, well,
I think that's what Commissioner Aaron's is proposing.
I mean, we would have to basically cut 55 million or $5,500,000 out of there to get it to where there's no cash applied.
And so what percentage, and maybe I'm not asking this the right way.
What percentage is 5 million
So
of
you'd be about
33,000?
7%, wouldn't it?
Yeah, what percentage is 5 million of 33,000?
Wouldn't that be 7%?
38.
All right. So
15?
So 274, 649.
And then also the question was asked, what else? We've got to reduce the
5,406,
percent, we've got to reduce the percentage amount of the cost of living increase. That's something we need to look at as well. We've got to stabilize the salaries for elected officials. They may not get an increase. We've also got to look at a temporary hiring freeze for non-law enforcement positions as well.
But that's not gonna get us anywhere close to $5.5 million.
When we start talking about across the board, what are the unintended consequences? Because, if we're really saying about this, are we talking about putting our highway superintendent saying that if we don't have enough money for overtime, that we're prepared not to plow the roads in the wintertime? Are we prepared not to fix the roads in the wintertime? Are we prepared to say to our state's attorney, I'm sorry, you just don't have to prosecute all these other people? I mean, I understand the idea that everybody would like to see us not have to take and spend any money on these taxes at all. But on the other hand, we got the responsibility of a growing county. I mean, we just grew 38%. We're 62,000 people. I don't know, we can't operate in a vacuum. And I'm empathetic to the idea that you don't want to have to go to the taxpayers and saying, okay, look, in 2 years from now, we're out of money. But yet, so many things are confronting us. Jail issues keep going up all the time. How long can we afford $200,000 a month potentially for incarceration? Courtroom space. And this all keeps coming. That's why we really have a much better job of explaining to the taxpayers where we are as far as our expenditures and our needs are. And the other thing, when you talk about freezing wages or whatever, there's 7,000 jobs out there that are going to continually increase the amount of pay that are going to get. And our employers are specialists in their own field. And we can't ask them to, to deny their ability to find other employment over there. And I just think that we have to spend a lot more time talking about these critical issues so that we come up with some consistency. So we're up against it now where we have to pass a budget. Well, do we like to spend 4.2 million out of our general fund, or 5.4, depending upon which side of the street you want to walk on? Not necessarily. But on the other hand, maybe we should start this, looking at next year as budget right now. Because if we do have to perform all of these cuts, let's take those in and make those known to the public so that they understand what's ahead of them and what services they're not going to have, what departments are not going to be at full staff, what's going to be the response time of a sheriff if they have a call, if we have to pull a deputy off, or if we can't fix the roads. I think those are the things that we have to tell the public on what we face and what we're going to do, rather than just all of a sudden carte blanche, Commissioner, just cut the budget by 5% or 7%.
We'd have to cut the budget by 18% to get the $5 million taken out.
18%.
18%. And honestly, in the auditor's office, the only thing I could cut is staff.
Mhm.
So, and there's a lot of departments that are that way.
And when you start cutting staff, you start talking about morale, you start talking about attitudes, you start talking about a lot of things when they go to work not knowing whether they're going to have a job or not. These are just issues that they aren't numbers on a sheet of paper. They deal with human lives as well.
Well, and those cuts aren't gonna get us to balance. That'd be a drop in the bucket compared to the overall amount of cash applied, which currently, the sheriff, prisoner care, and roads, those are the biggest expenses that we have. Roads is the discretionary expense. We have so many unfunded mandates that need to be paid for that come down from the legislature. So this is a factor of what we have been told we have to pay as well. So any commissioners have anything else out of this budget that they want to cut? I understand Commissioner Aaron's position.
Well, even if we can't cut 18%, can't we cut half of that across the board?
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Commissioner Gibbon, is because we can't cut 18, we should cut 0. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, is there's no alternatives or options being offered to cut anything. We need to make hard decisions. I'm willing to make them, I just articulated it. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'd welcome it. I think,
I wanna
like
know-
Commissioner
I wanna
Schmidt
know
said, it
before-
is- I would really like to have a productive conversation with Commissioner Schmidt. I think we could. I think we could have that.
I'd like to know the unintended consequences of what you do. It's easy to say, cut 9%, cut 7%, but what are you really doing? How many departments are gonna lose people? How many roads aren't going to be fixed? How many our roads in the wintertime aren't gonna be plowed? What's the effect on public safety? What's the effect on the sheriff's department on response time? You're not answering those questions. You're looking
Nobody's
at
talking-
numbers only on this thing. I'd like
Nobody's
to know
talking
what
about-
is going to happen. Doesn't that have some responsibility rather than just saying we're gonna carte blanche cut this thing up and we don't know what's going to happen? What kind of reaction do you think you're gonna have from people?
Well, I didn't drive the car in the ditch, but I'm more than willing to get it out. And there should have been more fiscal restraint showed by previous commissioners, which you were a part of, and you chose not to.
You know, it's easy
we're
when you're
stuck-
new to the party to say or blame what we have been done. This county has never had an opt-out. This county has always operated within its means. If we had been helter-skelter and we'd had opt-outs all over the place, such as our people to the north, I may have said something different.
Commissioner
they-
Schmidt, if I may interrupt, it's also
ahead.
that commission that created the reserves that we were able to function at all at this point.
That's correct.
Well, you're not operating within your means. You're not. It's a flat-out lie to say that you're operating within your means. You're dipping into your savings account to the extent of $5 million a year to pay to balance the budget. And I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of taxpayers. I know, Commissioner Schmidt, that you're thinking about this from the standpoint of government. I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of taxpayers and protecting their individual pocketbooks as well. Because they should be protected and represented as well.
Absolutely. That's why we, as commissioners, had presented an option to the taxpayers that would have controlled their expenditures. And instead, we are paying a fee to an entity outside to house our prisoners, in which that cost is skyrocketing beyond our means. And we see no sight of having any idea how that will get rectified.
We had each department come in and explain what options and consequences were for cuts. We made those decisions at that last meeting. Those have been taken out of the budget. They explain, we've already made these decisions in this provisional budget. So besides doing an across-the-board cut, the departments have already explained what they can afford to do, what they cannot afford to do. If we want to get rid of employees, okay, well, it's not going to get us where either Commissioner Aaron's or Commissioner Gibbon want to be. We are going to cut more road projects. So if that's where everybody's head is at, they need to put it on the record.
Well, is that all this is about, is getting confessions on the record?
It's not about
Or-
a confession, it's
or is
about
this-
reality.
Or is this about constructively working to further cut the budget?
Well, today is the day that we need to make a decision on this provisional budget.
I don't have the votes to cut the budget, but that's my proposal.
Well, it'd be nice, Commissioner Aaron's, if you had specifics, because if we did across the board, as the auditors indicated, the only thing that they have to cut is personnel.
Does anybody have any constructive ways to make any other cuts that they'd like to see specifically? And I'd like to hear the rationale behind each one.
Madam Chairman, I thought when we had each department head come in and they were cutting bare bones, they were talking about literally thousands of dollars, not huge amounts, but thousands of dollars of trying to cut that budget. I thought that they all took that very seriously. And we did get, 1.7? was it?
Sherry, what did we take out of that last
Yes.
budget?
Yep, it's 1.7.
1.7 million, wasn't it, that we took off?
And the lion's share of that was what?
Well, there was 1.7 in anything but the highway fund and 1.1 in the highway fund, so 2.8.
2.8.
And so the lion's share of those cuts came from where?
Well, if you look at everything but the highway fund, it was the 1.7. We took the straight 1.1 out of the highway, so that would be across the board. The sheriff took a 331,000, planning and zoning took 44, state's attorney took 88. Our, the ones that we statutorily have to manage took the biggest cuts.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this proposed budget? If not, I'd consider a motion.
Well, I think it's a public hearing,
Oh,
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, you're right. Anybody here that would like to come up and speak to our budget? And I'm gonna limit you to 3 minutes because we've got a couple of public hearings scheduled for 11 o'clock.
Do we want to start the public input after the,
Let's read the resolution first.
after
Well,
the,
I think,
Mine will just be a minute or two.
if you wanna, we can do yours and then
matter.
we can go back into it.
Okay.
So, that's fine.
David Gillespie, 1125 East Elder, Canton, South Dakota. Currently, I sit on the Lincoln County Soil Conservation District as a supervisor. And I've spoke to Lauren Brass, who's from Lennox. He's our chairman. And I believe Jim Jacobson put in for 24,000. It's a small increase, but I think he put in for 4,000 extra. We can do without that. So that could go back down to 20. And we do have a CD of over 16,000 on hand. So I feel we can, I know it's a small amount compared to what needs to be taken out, but I would say it's a couple straws on the camel's back that could be removed. So that would be, I don't know, it got so late, Sherry, on the 7th that I just went left and it got awfully late. So anyway, $4,000. It is set at 24,000. We could take 4 out of that. It's a very minute amount, but it is an amount. So that's all I have.
Are you proposing to use the CD to take that out as well, Dave?
Well, the CD they have on hand, it's a little over 16,000. I think that's remains where it's at, but I know we could get along without the 4. The county gives us, I think, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, 10,000 twice a year to operate on, and that's the way that is. It's a small amount, but it is something, so.
And which budget item is that, Dave?
Soil Conservation Service, I believe.
it's under the general fund. It'd be 610
Yeah.
on the budget
Okay.
sheet.
So we could reduce that by 4,000?
Yep, that would be my suggestion. I have let the chairman know about it too, so.
All right, thank you.
Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and recess our public hearing until after our matters that are scheduled for 11 o'clock. The first of which is the Purple Heart Medal County and Community Recognition Ceremony.
Do you want to bring all the folks in? There's a lot
Yeah.
of doors out there.
There are a lot of folks out there.
I don't care.
Welcome, everybody, to come on in to the commission room. Commissioner Schmidt's going to read the proclamation.
How you doing? Got the whole Harrisburg team here this morning.
We ready, Sherry? Read the proclamation first. It is my honor, ladies and gentlemen, to read the following proclamation in honor of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Whereas the Purple Heart Medal is the oldest military decoration still in present use and was initially created by George Washington in 1782 as the badge of military merit. And whereas the Purple Heart was first American Service Award or declaration made available to the common soldier and is specifically awarded to any member of the United States Armed Service wounded or killed in combat. with a declared enemy of the United States. And whereas the mission of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, chartered by an act of Congress in 1958, is to foster an environment of goodwill among the combat wounded veteran members and their families, promote patriotism, support legislative initiatives, and most importantly, make sure we never forget the sacrifices made by those so decorated. And whereas Lincoln County appreciates the sacrifices our Purple Heart Medal recipients made in defending our freedoms and believe it is important that we acknowledge them for their courage and show them the honor and support they have earned. Whereas people of Lincoln County have great admiration and the most gratitude for the men and women who have selfishly served their country and fellow citizens. Now therefore be it proclaimed that Lincoln County, South Dakota, by the affirmative action and declaration of the Board of Commissioners, does hereby bestow honor and gratitude upon the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Chapter 5350, and proudly supports the designation of Lincoln County as a Purple Heart County in the state of South Dakota, dated the 28th day of September 2021, whose signature will bear our chair, Ms. Tiffany Landine.
Thank you. Susan, did you want to say anything?
I will say a few remarks very quickly. I just want to introduce Ken Tunison. He is the regional commander for the Military Order of the Purple Heart, standing behind me, and we will be presenting the county signs that designate the county as a Purple Heart County, and then each community that has also done proclamations, which are the communities of Canton, Harrisburg, and Lenox, will also be receiving their signs today. These signs can be placed on state roadways entering a community or entering the county, and they are placed by the state on those community or county signs. And I thank everybody for supporting this, and I think it's an important thing that we recognize our Purple Heart recipients, as we've discussed before, just to keep that awareness, especially for our younger generation. And thank you again for your support.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Let's all stand and give them a
I
round
agree.
of applause.
So I don't know, I know that today is a busy, busy, busy day for the commission. So I don't know if any commissioner would like to have a photo opportunity out in the hallway as the meeting continues on, but we are going to be presenting the signs and taking pictures out in right outside the commission room, because I know that you guys need to keep moving along and we are double booked.
I think we could easily, if with everybody's indulgence, take 5-10 minute break to do that.
Yes.
Okay,
So we'll do
perfect.
that.
Okay,
Just for
thank
the
you.
record, Susan, thank you for all of your hard work in bringing this about. Okay?
Thanks. Okay, I guess we'll do this here
We'll be in
then?
recess.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, okay, all right.
Terry, you're gonna come up and we're gonna have our public meeting for the Lincoln County 22 to 26 5-year plan. Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I think I got everybody, but if you haven't signed in for the 5-year plan attendance, please do so. That way we can keep track of who's here for comments. So first of all, if you're looking at the 5-year plan booklet, you will notice some significant changes in the look of it. We changed it up over concerns that it was hard to read, hard to understand for the general viewing public. So we did put a lot of effort into it to hopefully make it easier to understand. So I'm going to start, just kind of give you a brief overview of each year's projects here, and then we'll take comments, questions on the plan. So again, 2022 to 2026 Highway and Bridge Improvement Plan, or otherwise the 5-year plan. So we'll start with fiscal year 2022, so this will be next year. So the paving project is going to be Lincoln County 143 from 152 down to Highway 46, and it's about 3.5 miles. You'll see it's down in the lower right-hand corner down there. Again, this is just a partial of the project that I was requesting. The rest of that got cut via budget earlier this month.
What's the cost of that project estimate? Sorry if I
Nope,
catch you off
you're-
guard.
That 3.5 miles is about 850,000 is what I have left in there.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask you those same costs for the next ones that you're gonna explain as well.
So, bridge replacement is 42-010-109. This structure is on the southwest corner of Lenox, on County Road 103. Again, this is, we went into a cost share with the city of Lenox on this. And then the other structure, number 2 up there, is 42-004-100. Currently, this is just a couple of large pipe. We're gonna replace them and do them at the same time as this bridge. And then that structure number 2 up there is gonna become a bridge again. 25 years ago, it was a bridge. And we took it out and put in pipe, and then it was not a bridge. But with all the water flow there, it needs a larger structure. So we'll be putting in a larger structure there.
And what are the costs for those two projects? What's our cost share on the first one?
Cost share, I believe it was 20% with the city of Lenox. Forgive me, it might be $100,000, $125,000 max, $150,000 max, I believe. Maybe it's $100,000. I'd have to get you definites on that cost share with them. The number 2 project, cost estimate on that is $352,000. The next project we have for 22 is 42-020-201. You'll see where that is on the map. This is on County Road 105. Again, this here is a preservation grant that we received from the DOT. Total cost on that project is $663,000. Our cost share is only, we're paying 20% of that. So. Fiscal year 2023 surfacing project. Now this one here, surfacing, you'll see down on the bottom, it's the very light green line across there. I got pretty big dreams on that one to get that road section done, both of those next year. Basically, it's going to be from County Road 117 all the way to Hudson. It's going to be about 16 miles. And again, the top one of that from 152 to Highway 11 or the bottom one to Hudson, that 9 miles, that was cut from this year's budget. So I'm hoping to do that and the other one next year, but again, if there's no funding, then they will not happen. So in 2022, asphalt treatment, the surface treatment, that's the reseal. We had resealing done this year, and with cuts in previous years, we no longer reseal every year, so 2023 is the next year for resealing, and that is the dark green lines on the map up in the northern part, and then there's a stretch in the southern part on those. And then the bridges for 2023, bridges 1, 2, 3, and 4 listed on the map that are in green there. Those structures, those are going to be part of the 2020 federal bridge grant. We're hoping that's when those structures get done. Again, the cost share on that is 18.9 or 18.8% on those structures. Another big bridge project that we'll be doing ourselves, and we'll be applying for a build grant at the end of this year, is going to be for 42-148 050, and that's the Harrisburg Lake Alvin Bridge on County Road 110. Again, cost share on that, we're probably, again, we'll have to see what we want to do for how much we want to do cost share. It might be 30% in order to make sure we get a grant, a build grant for this. Again, this is one that we did apply for this past year, and we missed it, so. And again, the ones in the bottom are PE grants or other grants that we're gonna be applying for those other structures. Probably the big notable one is gonna be 200, no, it's not on there yet. Will be the Hudson Bridge, the one that they replaced back in 2006 or 8. We got some significant settling going on that, so we're gonna be applying for a grant, but maybe that's in '24 that we'll be applying for that, so.
Is that the one going across the big city?
Yes, sir. 2024, surfacing, we're looking at up north, 110, 117, and 111. And again, I will remind you, once we get this far out, projects of where they are, when they happen. I mean, we're just kind of spitballing, but this is kind of what we're looking at. And the replacement in 2024 is 42, 110, 253. Been in conversations with Pleasant Township about doing a cost share on this. Don't have an agreement in place, but we're hoping to do so. So this is a structure that you heard about earlier this morning that we'll be closing the road on because of traffic on it, on this structure. 2025, again, the red lines, the dark red lines, we got a paving project on County Road 102 up in the upper left-hand corner, and then down a little bit, just going east of Lennox, we got 3 miles of County Road 122. Again, resealing, asphalt surface treatment, we'll have probably about 20 miles of that. And again, that's gonna be dependent if these projects get done, because if you don't have a paved project, then we probably won't need resealing done on them. But again, those are in the lower right corner down there. 2025, a bridge preservation rehab project. This is 42, 244, 255. That is the Hudson Bridge that I was talking about. We're hoping to get a rehabilitation grant for that, or preservation, to do some repairs on that.
Have you gotten any of those borings back? Is that the road that they're doing the borings on?
The section that's in the light pink?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yeah, and I've been working with them. I've given them more information. They asked for more information last week. They said they're getting close to giving us an answer, so.
Okay, thank you.
The next one, bridge replacement, is 42, 120, 283. Yeah, this is on County Road 125, about 3/4 of a mile north of Highway 46. Again, on that one, we'll be applying for a grant, a build grant in 2024. 2025, surfacing. We'll have Lincoln County 124. This is the road going through Worthing. Again, right now, 3.5 miles is all we have slated. But we do have some bridge replacements. And again, 42, 200, 226, 42, 200, 249. Both of those are on County Road 139. And then 42, 120, 152. That one is on County Road 125, about two miles south of Highway 18. And then all of those structures we'll be applying for grants for in 2025 and hoping to build them in 26. And that wraps it up. Again, this will be what I'm asking for is you guys to approve and sign off on this. We'll make any adjustments if there's adjustments. We'll have to add in our public comments into this attendance sheet. So, any questions?
Terry, and I know you probably weren't expecting this question, so if you're not, and you want to talk to it about in our next session when we're doing budgets, our budget discussion, that's fine too. It's been proposed that there be an across-the-board budget cut from anywhere from 9% to 18%. Now, if my math is right, the projects that you have slated for next year are about 1,400 or $1.4 million, a little over that. 18% of your budget is $1.4 million. What would an 18% cut do to your budget and what you were able to do with your staff and other resources?
So if I'm getting at what you're, 18%, I'd have to do the math on that, 18% on $8 million.
18% on the provisional budget that's in front of us now without any road and bridge levy funds is $1,468,492.
That's the amount I would have to cut?
Yes.
I would be able to, I'd be able to get that. I'd be cutting my pave project for next year, a micro project.
You'd be cutting all of those projects that are on your 5-year plan, wouldn't you, or would you find other places to cut?
Well, in essence, what I would do is I would keep the bridges, especially the ones that are in place for next year. As I previously told you several weeks ago, those make no sense to cut because we are already in the planning and engineering phases on these projects. So I guess we can cut them, but again, I guess you're throwing away money that we've already spent on those projects. So other projects that I do have is I have that microsurface project, that's for $600,000, and then my surface project would be $850. That'd give you your 1.45, right?
Okay,
1.25.
go ahead.
This very likely wouldn't be a one-time reduction in your budget. So this is a 5-year plan, pretty much, other than bridges, road maintenance.
Well, I do have, and again, it's not on my yearly sheets that I show you, but I do have asphalt maintenance. Typically, that's tonnage that we pave ourselves, and we have 12,000 ton a year for that. So we can maintain, cover up stuff that we do or that needs to be done. But I guess if you're getting to the bigger question, the underlying question is, I think on this year's budget, you're scheduled to cash apply just over $3 million to my budget. And so I guess if the question is, can I do without that entirety $3 million? Yes, I would be able to function. I would be able to do operating and maintenance of what we do. There would be no projects. I think I'd penciled it out before, and I think we'd probably be able to do about $1.5 million worth of bid projects a year with that money. But again, that's not gonna be doing we wouldn't do any paving projects. We'll probably end up doing that ourselves, which is not a big deal. But we wouldn't be able to do any kind of asphalt maintenance or preservation. I mean, unless we didn't do bridges, so.
Thank you. Will you stay here for our budget talk in case we
bet.
have any other questions as we're discussing the budget?
Yep.
Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions for Terry regarding the 5-year plan?
Public comment.
Yep. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to come up and speak to the 5-year plan that was presented? If not, any
We got one.
Oh. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. I have two concerns. It looks
Just for
like.
the record.
Sure. Anthony James Ventura, 47763, 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034.
Thank you.
It looks like a lot of this goes through the cities, and a lot of it is the land that the cities are claiming out their 3-mile range. Why are we not maintaining that or turning that into the cities and letting them maintain it and spend the money down south where it belongs, where the county exists, where they control?
'Cause they haven't been willing to take it over, and if they don't take it over, we're still responsible for it.
Well, then-
We've done that with a couple municipality roads currently. I just want to answer if it may.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're more than willing to work with municipalities. Unfortunately, we have no leverage to force them to do anything. The best we do is try to maintain it as, and Terry, if I'm incorrect, as a county road, but if they ever look at they needing to improve it, then that's when we really start to have the ability to negotiate with them to transition it over to their responsibility.
The other thing is in the agricultural district, we have a few issues that restrict people. We have the not ability to have industrial or commercial. We also limit 4 houses per quarter. And so you're limiting the population, and then they say, hey, we don't have a good traffic count. Well, you're you're basically discriminating against the people in the agricultural district because they don't have the ability to grow. And so that's another issue when you don't fix the roads and you don't fix the bridges. And the option is let's stick up a weight limit sign. And that's dangerous because nobody's paying attention. And so I think a lot of this stuff needs to be sent to the cities, and the commissioners need to find a way to turn it over. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else from the public wish to come up and speak on the 5-year plan? All right, any discussion amongst the commissioners? If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the 5-year plan. Terry, what happens if it's not approved?
You have until October 14th or 15th to turn this into the DOT. If we do not approve this plan, then any eligible structures under the Bridge Improvement Grant Program, we will not be eligible for any kind of funding.
Thank you. Is there a thought to table this until after we do our budget discussion today?
Madam Chair, I'd move to have this placed on our first meeting in October.
Just a
Tabled.
Just a second.
I would caution you as far as not pushing it out too far, because we got to get all this put together and I got to get it sent to the DOT. So, I mean, I guess.
That's our next meeting, so.
So it'll be the, what is it, the 7th?
The 7th,
Does that give you enough time?
that's 7 days. to
Well,
do
it's
this.
not gonna be another public meeting, is it? Because
No, this
we
is
won't,
just a table.
I won't get the affidavits back.
No,
that
it would
need to be
just
part
be a
of this.
table.
Okay,
So I'm
good.
I'm just wanting to table it till after our budget discussion today, because I think it's part and parcel of that discussion. So
Okay, let it die.
that's all I'm wanting to do. Can we agree on that? All right.
Chair, I will move that we table this until after our budget discussion is concluded.
Thank you. Can I have a second, please?
Second for discussion and vote.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Sherry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Aaron's,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
No, because we have no means of funding it.
Commissioner Gibbon,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes. All right, we're gonna go back to our budget discussion. We had started the public comments portion of that hearing. Mr. Gillespie spoke. Who else in the audience would like to come up and speak to the budget? I will say that comments were made before some of you were in here. There was a discussion by Commissioner Gibbon about cutting across the board 9% from everybody's budget.
Commissioner Aaron's.
Or, no, from Commissioner Gibbon, it was 9%, and from Commissioner Aaron's, it was 18%. So I want to hear from the department heads on if that's even possible and what it would mean for the office. Where would it come from and what are the consequences? So if you'd like to come up and address those things, now is the time to do it.
Good morning, Carla Gosen, Lincoln County Director of Equalization. To answer partial of those questions, a 9 or 18% increase would be a result in staffing costs. Many of my expenses for operating are mandated through education, attendance that are required by the appraisers. I guess the biggest concern we need to think about is if you think it back to the assessor's office when you took your foot off the gas pedal, assessments became null. If we were to understaff the office and assessments were to, stay null, didn't change, people would think that's a great deal. My taxes aren't going up. That's not the case. Those are the types of situations that cause assessments to, when you do have to catch up, you see 30, 40, 50, 60% increases, because when you're not maintaining your assessments at the level that they're supposed to be at, and that finally does catch up to you, then there are ramifications, and the ramifications come from the homeowners and with the large assessment increases. And keep in mind, the assessor's office, if we are to cut staffing, could result in our office helps supply the budgets for the whole county. And not just the county, the school, the cities, the township. We're the ones putting the growth numbers on the book so they can raise their budgetary needs. I would hate to rush that part of it in our office because we take pride in coming up with our growth numbers and being accurate. I think it's just a snowball effect. And we're the largest or fastest growing county in the state, and we have been for years. Why are you thinking of budget cuts? I don't understand that. I mean, I understand we're trying to balance budget and we're trying to, work within our means, but I think that has been going on for many years, and we've stayed very conservative. And at some point, our conservativeness has caused us to be at the situation we're at today. And I think our county treasurer said it very well at the last budget meeting. We need to raise taxes. We need to ask for the people to help us fund Lincoln County so we can get the roads done, so we can get the bridges done. My children, your grandchildren, your friends, your family, we all drive on these roads. Our school buses are on these roads. Why are we sacrificing that? Shame.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, a 9% cut, it would be about $108,000 out of your budget. An 18% cut would be $216,000 out of your budget. Would that be
2 to 4 staff members?
And so how many staff members would that leave in your office?
Anywhere from 12 to 14.
And working the 40 hours a week that your staff do out on doing the reappraisals and assessments, how would that affect it specifically? I mean, would you be having to pay overtime, or would you just forego that altogether?
To get the job done, you would have to pay overtime to many of those folks. Or I don't have, projects to cut per se. I mean, our job is to get it done by, state deadlines, by laws. I mean, I have until November 1 and March 15th, and, we're mandated by all these laws and rules. Number one, you have to have a staff to complete these projects. And, are people willing to sacrifice, more time? I don't know. I mean, it's never been presented to us, and I've seen what Lincoln County has done with an understaffing, and it's not been good. It's not been good.
So you're the first of several people that I want to come up and talk to about Commissioner Gibbon and Commissioner Aaron's proposals. I would ask Commissioner Gibbon and Commissioner Aaron's, what exactly, where is this 216,000 or 108,000 going to come from out of her budget if what you're proposing happens? What is she supposed to do and still run her office?
That's not the right question.
Well, what is the question?
The question is, why do we keep running over our budget? It was $33 million last year with $5 million cash applied. Why? Why are we overspending? The property tax payers only gave us X amount of money. We have to live within our means.
So
The way
if I may.
the way that I've said this in the past is just like Commissioner Gibbon has told me when he was principal. The department heads need to be told what their budget targets are, and then they come back to us and they have to live within those budget targets. And that hasn't happened here.
I hear you, Commissioner Aaron's, but so if we looked at a couple options, so even if we give the 5% credit back, which is, has to be part of our budget, it's not intended to be spent, we're looking at $3.14 million. Of which, if we look simply at the cash applied into the highway budget, that's a little over $3 million. Or if we try to take that out of each department, which have been reiterated several times that the only place that they have to cut fixed costs is, it then gets to be what is expendable is personnel. And I'm sorry, personnel is not expendable when we have to provide services. But if we did, we'd have to relinquish 1 out of every 4 individuals that work for the county.
Thank you.
Carla, just a minute, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Carla, we operated with as best we could by not having an assessor staff that was totally understaffed, right?
Correct.
We weren't spending wildly. We were very, very conservative. So we drove way behind on all of our assessments on our property, which denied school districts the amount of money that they could have had. But we tried to bring them back up to where we're supposed to be by state law. And we then learned of these tremendous tax heights that were incurred on the part of taxpayers because we, the county, were not doing an assessing process on a regular basis. So some properties hadn't been assessed for 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. So are we saying then, by cutting your staff back, we go back to that same policy of not getting an assessing done at a proper time? So once we're falling behind on our assessing process that is necessary for the townships, for the schools, for everything. So what are we accomplishing? Nothing, but we're cutting off the source of revenue that these other entities need. And we'll be right back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago, correct?
I hope that's not the case, because under my watch, I would not allow that to happen. So what does that mean? Well, that means we have to work harder and smarter and, everything else that's cheesy saying that's set out there. But it's true. And here's what I see happening. People working harder because our technology is probably going to be cut, along with staffing. Morale goes down. Maybe they just don't care as much. That's what concerns me. I mean, we're developing a system that is going to be a lot easier to manage and control within the assessor's office. We've been working towards that for the last 5 years. We still have steps to be made. But by cutting the budget in our office or any other office, I'm speaking for my office only, the steps that we're making, we'd go backwards. So we're losing the technology and we're probably, you know, going to create maybe some inequities that should not be created. Example, we're able to reappraise instead of 3,000 to 5,000 parcels per year, maybe one to three. So now our reappraisal timeline goes from 5 to 7 years to 7 to 14 years. You know, then we're falling out of standards, and eventually over time we will get to the point which you're saying is our assessments will fall behind. It will. It would have to, because we're not able to do as many projects, reappraisal projects, that we are equipped to do with the staff that we have today.
Carla,
So-
you're also assuming also that we're not going to have added growth. And we have growth coming out of our ears as the #1 county in the state that is growing. So you not only have the other parcels you currently have, you will have a tremendous amount of new parcels to take into consideration. Because if you look at the growth plans for everywhere in our county, they are all growing at very fast rates of speed. So now you're going in with a depleted staff to try to keep current with what you currently have, to try to meet the growth that is out there and will continue every single year.
I know the building committee heard some of the projections that are out there on the growth numbers that I've seen on plats and parcels and building permits, property transfers, and it's a trickle-down effect. It's affecting treasurer's office, register of deeds, and not just the assessor's office, but we're looking at just this year compared to last year, 20 to 30% growth, and you want me to cut staff? I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense.
Does any of the commissioners have any other questions for Carla? So I'd like these questions answered. I'm being told it's the wrong question. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's being framed as the wrong question. How do you want to cut that much out of her budget and still operate her office?
We have to live within our means.
What if that
Taxpayers-
means she can't run her office and fulfill her statutory obligations?
So what, this is now an interrogation as
No,
opposed
no,
to
no.
a conversation?
It is
That's
a
what-
conversation.
No, it's not. I want the answers. That's what you're saying. I want you to answer it my way.
Well, I think the
That- that's-
public wants the
Can I
answers.
answer
The
you?
public does not want to raise taxes, and the public wants us to live within our means.
I
That's what
don't
they
want to raise taxes either.
And we
These
ha-
are necessities.
And we have a budget. We have a budget that we have to live within. We collect X number of dollars. The X number of dollars that we have is what we have to live on. Hard decisions have to be made. I understand that some on the commission do not want to have to make the hard decisions.
I think you're avoiding the hard decisions because you're simply doing it across the board without having to define, so these departments try to figure out how they answer.
Well,
You've
haven't
skated
made-
with
you
that for the
haven't made
last.
one. You haven't
you-
made one
Okay, one
proposal.
person at a time is gonna speak.
You've gotten away by saying no to our budget for 3 years without ever proposing what those cuts should be to operate within our means. We are operating with our means because the previous commissions have created a reserve. So we are operating with our means. The problem comes in time, we're not going to have those reserves to operate. That's why I'm proposing that we need to have this conversation today and not in a year or 2 years.
Well, I've told you very specifically, Commissioner Poppins, we collect X amount of tax dollars. Those budget targets are given to the committee heads, directors. Those directors can run their department. They can come back and tell us how they intend to live within those means. It's up to them to manage their department. We've granted them that discretion.
And what
Some-
if they're not able to operate?
You're posing it as.
What if? It's a what if.
Armageddon.
What is, it's just a what if. What if
That's the
they're not able
question.
to?
I'd
It's
like-
not true.
All right,
It's not that they won't
I have
be
the
able to
floor right
operate.
now. Mr. Golden, will you come up? I have a couple of questions for you. When the elected officials do not have the funds to run their offices, and they can show that they're not able to do that, what is their recourse, if any? And it's kind of a loaded question, but what's mandatory that we fund and what's discretionary, if you can answer that?
I'm gonna miss a few.
That's okay.
The county has to fund county poor relief. So if somebody comes before the county and they have medical bills that the hospitals have given them care, those have to go ahead and be paid by the county. If they weren't able to work or procure insurance, then those bills are for the county. And we get those at the Medicare rate. We can budget for them, but you can't predict them because that's a fee that you just have to pay when they come in. The mental health board, we have to pay for. And then the mental health care that Avera or HSE pays for Lincoln County residents, we go ahead and pay for that care as well. We don't control that, and that's one of those things that's mandated that we take care of. The public defender's contract or the public defender fees, we don't have control over that other than what we contract for. Those are all going to be ones that are reviewed by the court. They determine whether or not they're valid and who gets appointed. So we don't have any control over what that is. We estimate every year on what we expect them to be, but those are fixed. We do not have control of the county jail budget because even if we had a jail, if somebody's gonna be incarcerated, we have to go ahead and fund that. So we have an obligation to fund law enforcement and the jails. And so right now, we're contracted with Minnehaha County through 2024, and we pay $97 a day for every inmate. That's an expense that we have to pay. We're contracted for that. If you're asking specifically when it comes to the different offices, I can't really give you an absolute number, but the commission by statute has to provide facilities and people for the specific offices of treasurer, equalization, auditor's office, state attorney's office, and the sheriff's office. And it has to be, I would probably say, an adequate funding. And you get to set what that adequate funding is for those offices. Obviously, if you set it at 0, then we wouldn't be adequate. Somewhere in between. Those are the ones I can think of that are absolutely mandatory.
So let
that
me
you have
ask
to
you
fund.
this. Let's say prisoner care. We cut that by 18%. We're still gonna get that bill, correct? We still have to pay it.
Yes,
And so then we would have to supplement the budget at the end.
yes.
So those numbers are there for a reason because they're projections. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So, I mean, is it gonna do us any good to do an across the board on those of 18% or 9%?
That is a policy decision for the board. I just give legal advice. I'm just answering
Right, I mean, we're gonna,
questions on what's there.
we're gonna get the bill and we have to pay it, whatever it is. So it would be maybe irresponsible to take that much out, is my opinion, if we're gonna end up supplementing the budget later.
Madam Chair, if you might, if
Go
you
ahead.
look at the board or at the screen, I put up our general budgeted revenue versus our actual revenue and our general budgeted expenses versus our actual expenses. I think we see that Lincoln County is conservative. If you look across, 2020, we had $18,993 in revenues. We spent $18,145,000. We did not spend above our means. This does not count cash applied. In 2019, we had 16,424,000, well, we know what happened there, and we spent 17,354,000. Otherwise, typically throughout the years, from 17, 16, 15, we have actually more revenues than what we budgeted for, and we have less expenses than what we budgeted for. So I think to say that the county is living without outside of its means is inaccurate, as the history shows here, that we have been very conservative, considering we have not had an opt-out or any other extra means of financing besides the property taxes.
Bill, when I sat here a year ago, I thought the comment was being made that Lincoln County was going to experience in 2021 4 to 6 homicide trials and would be an expense to the county. Did that happen?
We had 5, I believe, going at one time.
How many did you have, or how many
We
aren't they
resolved-
done yet?
We
Or
got 4 of them resolved. The death penalty case was scheduled to go in January of this year. For a variety of different reasons I won't get into, it's been moved back either to the fall of 2022 or
So did-
23, so
did
it's
that
still going on.
save us a considerable amount of money then for this budget?
I would say for this year,
Yeah.
no, because our numbers are up 87% for felonies, or 80-some%, and we're about the same thing for misdemeanors. We did not really, nobody expected the numbers of crimes and arrests to increase by that much. In 2020, when we had that, I mean, that was the highest number of homicides that we've had in the county, I think.
Because
we were
trials are
concerned.
expensive, correct?
Yes, the entire process is expensive because usually you have more than one attorney on the homicides, and then the expert witnesses and the number of hearings and everything else. Even if you get it resolved prior to trial, it's an extensive expense, just across the board. But we're seeing more, I mean, the crimes we're talking about are violent crimes. I mean, the things that we're seeing come in the offices are more egg assaults, more rapes. I believe Mr. Woolman was just upstairs on a,
So you're saying it's a wash financially, you're saying? Less of Peter and more of Paul?
I'm telling you across the board that we're just seeing a massive increase in criminal cases
I
coming
know
in.
you said that in the past, but I just was curious where we were at on this supposedly, what we were told a year ago on the homicide part.
Yeah, the homicides, around here, when I took the contract back in 2000, there hadn't been a homicide in Lincoln County for 11 years. It's pretty rare, and I'm gonna knock on wood because that's what we do in the office, that we don't have a spat of them now, but we've had a whole bunch of near misses. We have attempted murders out there, we've had shootings, we've had stabbings and beatings. It's just, we've been extremely fortunate not to have somebody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Golden?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I wouldn't mind hearing from the other department heads if we proposed a 18% or a 9% cut where they would cut.
Right, this is the public hearing part of our meeting, so I would invite anybody that wants to come up here and address Commissioner Gibbon or Commissioner Aaron's proposals to come up and speak to it. Commissioner Gibbons was speaking to a 9% across the board cut. Commissioner Aaron's was speaking to an 18% cut across the board. So I'd like to know how cutting 18% of your budget is going to affect your office.
Debbie Block, treasurer. I would have to cut people. I wouldn't have
How many?
anywhere else. Probably 2, 3, 4.
What would that mean for your office?
That's probably half of my staff. And we just wouldn't be able to work that way.
How many windows then would you be able to have open?
4,
And then would there be somebody available to answer the phone?
probably not.
Because that's kind of, that's been a
That's
problem.
one of our issues. We're working on that too.
Okay,
But yeah, it would be, phone messages would be way backlogged.
So the only place for you to cut is just personnel.
Personnel.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? It is public, yep.
So can I go ahead, even though I'm sitting up here?
Yes, you can.
So the auditor's
go.
office with that, if we do 18%, we're looking at 77,000, that's at least one staff member. But then I'm curious, as 18% off my elections is gonna be 36,000. I'm mandated to have 3 to 5 precinct workers. I'm mandated to make sure that there's ballots there. There wouldn't be able to be a cut-in elections.
So we'd have to take that out of your auditor staff.
No, elections is its own
Yeah,
thing.
but if we're having to make up,
We're gonna have to take it out of what?
we'll take it out of the rest of your budget. I'm just, if we have areas
that
that we
won't
can't
work.
cut the 18%, it's gotta get made up on other department heads.
Yeah, that won't work.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Can you state your name and address, please?
Chad Skiles, 820 North Dakota Street, Canton. I just want to relate a story. The moral of the story is going to be, we're talking about potential staffing cuts to try to work this budget. And I want to just throw one word out there, and that word is efficiency. A week ago today, at the commission meeting, during one of the breaks, or I think it was after the meeting, because it was a short meeting, I stopped and got my tags for my vehicle. I sat down at the first sit-down window, and I had one tag to get, and proceeded to go through it. She's processing my stuff, then she has to get up and walk completely to the other end of the room to get my tags off the printer. And then she comes back and she sits down, continues with it. She asked how I was going to pay for it. And I said, I'm just going to use my debit card instead of writing a paper check. She's like, okay. She takes my debit card. She gets up. She walks again all the way to the other side of the room, processes it, and comes back and sits down. How much time did that add for one person? Not much. But now add that time after time after time, window after window after window. And that adds up in a day. And that's where I'm going with the whole efficiency thing. Maybe there's something to look at within the departments to make their departments more efficient. And I'll end with just this comment. It's ironic that we're in these discussions and that I'm relating that story, because last week, I believe it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, as I was watching the Minnehaha County Commission meeting, they had a report. They had an outside entity come in and do kind of an efficiency study, and it was specifically dealing with the Minnehaha County Treasurer's Office. And he came back with all of these different suggestions, and the things that I just related were some of the exact same things. And so it's just something to think about for the commission and something to think about for all of the department heads. Thank you.
Thank you. And your comments are well taken, and I'm sure Debbie would like to come up. But generally speaking, the elected officials run their own offices, so that would maybe be a good discussion for you to have with our treasurer if you have suggestions that you can make. And I'm glad that you made them today, but I'd like to give her a chance to respond to that if she wants to.
As far as running to the other end for the credit card machine, we have one credit card machine. Those machines cost money, so that would raise my budget. I do have some coming but we're waiting for them to come. We ordered them in March and have not gotten them yet, and for one for every window. So that will help with that. As far as the printers, we have 4 sets of 2 printers. That's all the state will give us, so each window does not have their own printer. They have to share them. So I don't know. I've tried to have extras and they just don't give them to me.
Thank you.
Debbie, did you say that if you cut you would have 4 windows open?
Probably,
4.
yeah.
And I go back to the fact that we're growing,
Yeah,
so they would get used to long lines.
they would have to.
Yeah.
And our lines, we, you know, I can tell growth is coming because we didn't used to ever have hardly any lines.
Yeah.
And now we do. Mondays and Fridays are the worst.
Yeah.
And last week of the month is always the worst too. Last day is crazy. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure everything that Mr. Golden covered. I just wanted to give a brief overview of what's going on in my office and possibly address Commissioner Gibbons' question a little bit further as well. And I know it's late in the morning and I don't want to wax poetic here, but the traditional role of the prosecutor is to be a minister of justice. And the role of the prosecutor is not simply to seek convictions at jury trials, but rather to seek justice on behalf of the victims and the community and the defendants as well. One of my roles as a prosecutor is to take into account who the defendant is, how they're situated in life, how their acts brought them in front of the court, and to strike an agreement that weighs into account, the victim's interest into account, and the community's interest into account. We do what we can to stay out of jury trials whenever possible, simply because of the time, the cost, the uncertainty. And again, we believe that we can balance those interests in a more efficient way and save the taxpayers' money by striking agreements where appropriate. And that happens in 95%, probably 95% of the cases that we work on. And that is the role of the prosecutor. It's not to go in and try everything and to try and, put another notch in the handle of my pistol, but rather to seek justice and to do so in the most efficient way possible. And we do that through plea agreements. Commissioner Gibbon, you had a question about those 5 cases that we had. We've whittled that down to one big case, and that case is somewhat of a line item budget matter for us in both last year's budget, next year's budget, and then probably will be in 2023's budget as well, because we don't know exactly when it's going to go to trial. We know that it likely will go to trial. I think we've got a contract with at least one expert that's probably in that range of 20 to 30, 20, I think it's right around $20,000. And those are the bigger costs, in a bigger case like that, the retaining experts. The majority of our expert witnesses don't charge us. I mean, the state experts from the health lab and peer, the forensics lab and peer, we generally don't get big bills from them. Where we do incur bills would be supplies, exhibits and things of that nature, digital evidence and things like that. But retaining experts is usually the big item. And our budget really hasn't changed that much with that exception of that death penalty case and that bigger line item for supplies and for the expert witnesses that we're probably going to need. So overall, things have been fairly static in my proposed budgets, and I think that I usually come in a little under budget traditionally. I got a good nod there from the auditor, thank you. But we try and run a zero line, or a zero, I think that's the term, zero line, where we're not adding fluff to our budget. I think that we've got adequate staffing. I would hate to see what it would look like if we had to cut staffing. And I'd hate to have those conversations with victims of crimes about what we can and can't do and what we can and can't prosecute. I think that Kellerland had a story yesterday about an issue with Marcy's Law and whether or not a victim felt like she was getting justice in the courtroom up in Minnehaha County. the individual that was working with Marcy's Law was a victim in one of our cases and was highly complimentary of my staff and what we'd done in our efforts to pursue justice on her behalf and against the defendant that offended against her. We were just up in the courtroom this morning on a sexual contact and sexual exploitation case involving a grandfather and a granddaughter who traveled to the state of South Dakota from Minnesota. We had about 10 to 15 people. Had 2 expert witnesses that were paid for by the defendant. And I think that the victims were very satisfied with the sentence that was just rendered. But again, I don't know what I would tell those people if I didn't have the budget and staff to be able to prosecute those offenses. They're serious offenses. I'd have to start turning a blind eye to the broken windows, so to speak. Not that it's great to quote Rudy Giuliani these days, but that in effect is what we do. We handle the small crimes, and you hope that through giving appropriate attention to those matters, you don't have to prosecute the bigger crimes later on. But all victims are important to my office, and I hope that I'm not in a situation where I have to tell them I don't have the staff or the resources to be able to prosecute those offenses that they've been victims of. So, any questions?
So I'm going on the high end, because that was the number that was first brought up by Commissioner Aaron's. So with his proposal, he would do 339,206, yeah, $339,260 from your budget.
It would have to be.
What would you do?
It would have to be staff. Because, I mean, the rest of my costs are fairly static.
How much of your staff would that take out?
3 to 4. Well, it depends on which, if we start pairing out, paralegal, secretarial, attorney positions, that would vary. But I'd have to study it. Putting me on the spot, I don't.
Sure, and
I don't have a
I
great
don't
answer
want to.
for you.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that.
But that would lead to having to turn a blind eye.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We talked a little bit about this when we were looking at staffing for next year, and I withdrew the request for the additional attorney position. We have the numbers to justify it, I believe, but if I had to cut back on staff and the numbers remain as is, I can't, as non-exempt employees, I can only beat.
I mean,
it's
for
a
the
terrible
record,
thing to
you
say,
are,
but you can only whip the mule so hard.
for the record, you had already removed an additional staff that you had wanted to have to fulfill
Correct.
what you thought were the needs.
We took some money out of sort of our continuing legal education fund or the travel conference. And then as well, we took the full-time position out, but then rearranged a salary issue or looked at a retention and promotional opportunity for those individuals that have been with the office for a period of time and meet certain requirements. So.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions for Mr. Woolman? All right, thank you. Anybody else in the audience that would like to come up? Good afternoon, sir. You just state your name and address, please.
Ernest Strautmeyer, 28503 474 Avenue, Worthing. That one chart that was up here maybe would have helped me understand a little bit, but my general question has to do with, that one. Like with over the last 15, 10, and 5 years, we've had so much additional things happen in the county. There's so many homes. Harrisburg, there's quarter sections of land there. And maybe this shows how much additional money has came in. I don't know what the numbers are, and that's my question. And I don't know why there isn't a lot of money coming in, and maybe there is. I don't understand, I don't know. But to me, when I think about how much has been improved, commercial buildings, how much has happened, why isn't there enough money coming in that way?
Well,
If I may, Madam Chair.
go ahead.
Maybe to explain it, with our current mill levy of and I'm rounding, severely rounding.
What is it?
I used 2%, so we generated $800,000, I believe, Madam Auditor, last year?
It is,
Are you talking about in growth?
In
From-
growth.
Let me pull it up.
So at 800,000, that's $40 million of additional property that has to be added to the county to generate that $800,000. And then they typically, a lot of this property, if it's commercial to municipality, they have a graduated, you know, it's 25% this year, 50, 75, or 20, 40, 60, 80, actually. So it takes time for that to come to us. So with all the growth that you see with our mill levy as low as it is, it takes a substantial amount of growth to have it come back to the county for tax purposes, so.
the
School
count,
districts, you know, giving their lion's share of the tax bill, obviously see that much more, but we just don't see that because we have a very low mill levy. Actually, it's lower than I thought, it's at 1.89. We just don't see it.
so
With-
how many pennies on of the tax dollar does the county actually receive?
Oh, tax dollar, that's right here. We generate 14,207,000, I wrote through it, so I scribbled through it, so that's property tax.
Isn't it about 12 cents, Sherry?
Yes.
So your tax dollar goes lots of other places. And it doesn't all come to the county
Right, yeah.
when
it
you pay your
goes to the
property
town.
taxes.
So with the growth in 21, we had 3.053% growth. We seen $394,873 tax increase from that growth.
Okay, then the other things that happen are like what's happening right now. The gas companies out there putting gas lines in. And it's right next to my mom's road, so I see the traffic. And I can't believe how much traffic, and the county road next to my place, that creates. My question, is there anything that they contribute to our road cost?
As far as use of the road? Yeah, I think
Abuse.
we're mandated, that's a public road, we can't restrict, for instance, put a or a toll bridge or something like that to generate. The state funding or mechanism does give us a mechanism to create a fine or a fee for using our roads or public roads.
Those roads weren't built to be taking the semis that they're hauling the equipment on. And then, so then if what you're saying is a project like that happens, there's a company that's making millions of dollars, they're doing business, they're making revenue. And you're saying we don't get
We're not allowed, correct me if I'm wrong, I have legal advice here, but no, we don't get, they're public roads for commerce, there's commerce laws and all that affect that, so. No,
If
we
it-
cannot impose a fee or a.
If it's an overweight issue, like an overweight vehicle, they can get pulled over, they can get weighed, they can get cited. There are civil penalties that go with that. And those civil penalties, which are the lion's share of any fine they would pay, would go to the state.
Ernest, we also have a wheel tax that we assess.
But that's only on our own vehicles, that's not vehicles that.
No, from outside or big corporations, but we do have a wheel tax, which is shared with townships. And of course, we get a share of that, but that really doesn't account for all that much.
But what I see is the license plates are basically Texas,
Yeah.
Illinois, Washington State, all out of state, and there are projects here and they're abusing the roads. And it's terrible. I can't even tell you how many semis that they haul their equipment back and forth doing that project. It's not just one project. I can't believe that there's not a way to get a revenue from that.
Theoretically, the revenue comes from the improvement of the value of whatever project they're doing within our county and improves. But as you see, though, we generate $800,000 in 1 year of additional growth. It doesn't, development out in the rural areas does not help our budget. It costs more to administer the growth outside of the municipalities than the revenue that it generates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone
Good
else?
points, Ernest.
Anyone else like to come up and speak?
Betty Otten, 46787 273rd Street, T. As you know, I've said it before, I'm not politically correct. But I guess I'm really not understanding why you're all calling out Commissioners Aaron's and Gibbon when the purpose of this is to find out what can be reduced to make this budget come into line without having to use all the cash. They're sacred cows you guys aren't even looking at. Let's just talk about one. You guys made a hard decision to close the transfer station in Worthing. That has now, as I'm understanding, been purchased, and it's going to be reopened by a private company to do the same thing, to take that tax burden off of Lincoln County. I think it was Ruth Sanitary that bought that to do that. So I think that's all in the works. Why aren't we doing the same thing, I'm sorry, with the 4-H building? Why is Lincoln County paying to make this entity when that could be done by private donations, or it shouldn't even been bought in the first place? My second one, salaries of elected officials should not have raises. They were elected at a certain cost, and my understanding is you guys are giving raises right and left to the elected officials. No offense, but it is a sacred cow, and they shouldn't have, it should be a set elected official salary. Number 3, department heads seem to be sacred cows as well, because if a department head can sit in here for every single commission meeting and then we're still paying for an assistant, something's wrong. And paying medical bills. Yes, they brought up that the commission, that if someone didn't have insurance enough to pay, that Lincoln County paid for those. Well, I've sat in these meetings where you guys have gone ahead and paid these expensive medical bills for these people when specifically asked, they said, well, yes, I could have gotten insurance, but it was too expensive. So those are sacred cows that you guys need to look at instead of coming against 2 of your fellow commissioners. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to come up and speak?
I'll just address my budget. I think it's pretty simple. If we cut 9%, we would cut 9% of our services, staff, equipment. If you cut out staff, we need less equipment. The jail budget clearly is out of my control. It's nearly half of my budget. My concern is we've come a long ways with the sheriff's office. The crime calls are down as far as we're preventing crime. Now, we have increased in felony arrest and misdemeanor arrests. Partially that's because we have more deputies out there, there's more police officers. However, if we go back to the way it was, we will be a reactive agency versus a proactive agency. I'm getting calls or having conversations with people, hey, my security system went off at 3 o'clock in the morning, I jump out of bed, and I couldn't have been more happy because I saw the reflection of a Lincoln County Sheriff's vehicle driving through our storage units. Those break-ins and burglaries are down from 7, 8, 9 a week to 1 and none. So if we need to cut the budget because there's no money, it's my belief that I'm telling you as the commissioners, this is what it costs for good public safety. Now, if we're gonna cut it by 18%, then I want that to be your decision on that we're gonna cut our staff and our equipment, because I'm gonna tell my constituents that, hey, we were there, we were getting close, but because of funding, I just can't do that stuff. I can't be proactive. I have to be reactive. So I think the cost savings will be on the front end, but on the back end, it's gonna cost us more. And it's a public safety issue. But if I cut 18%, I think I've cut the jail down to the minimum. I would have to cut staff. And then I could cut equipment as well. But 18% of my staff would be 6 deputies.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Sheriff, thank you. Just for clarification though, if half of your budget is fixed, as in the jail costs, you would actually have to double because the rest of it, of your budget would have to pick up all of it. So if it's 9%, it's 18%. If it's 18%, it's 36%.
Which would be very accurate, or I would be asking for supplements for my jail budget at the end of the year. So if we cut the jail budget more than it is, I think it would be a fictitious number. So you're absolutely correct. I'd have to cut probably 10 staff members. I don't think that's possible. And we are working now with 2 and sometimes 3 deputies on at one time for a county of 500 square miles. It wouldn't be fair to the deputies to be out there alone, which they were when I got here.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions for Sheriff?
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience wish to speak? If not, any further discussion among the commissioners? Oh. I did see you sitting back there, and I
Yeah.
thought maybe I did want you to come up.
I was waiting for everybody else because, you know, as the IT department, we have infrastructure in every department that the county has. Doing a cut on the IT department would be a significant problem for us. Many of our services are contracted for 5 or 6 years, so that would give us a discount on things. So if you did cut things, I'd have to come back and has to get that supplemented back in. Another thing is if you cut the equipment cost, a lot of our equipment actually goes to the public services departments. So if you're cutting equipment out of mine, that would be where my biggest line item is. It would cut equipment out of the sheriff's office, state's attorney's office, 911 center, and things like that. It's a very, as the county administration offices, it's very significant of how much my budget actually goes to those offices. Because when you work with, I'll use the sheriff's department as an example, when you put the sheriff's name on it or law enforcement on it, they like to increase the price on it. It has to have more demand, it has to have more processing power in it, in the equipment. That's gonna eat away at it. Things like the security system here, our security system's been here for a very long time. It's getting to that point where we're slowly trying to migrate things and get it upgraded. If you start cutting out of that, I would degrade the efficiency of all of our staff and the services that we provide for our citizens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where to begin. I wasn't anticipating that we'd be talking about reduction of staff, which is unfortunate, to say the least. And I'm getting a little choked up just even standing up here before you. So if you want to specifically talk about my budget, if you want to cut 18%, those are benefits going directly towards our employees that are aiding in, 1, recruitment, which is already in a tough market, and 2, also retention. After this conversation, I have to say I'm not too worried about recruitment. I'm more worried about retention at this point after this conversation. Just a little bit of more information talking about recruitment. I pulled some numbers. I was asked last week about what has recruitment looked like the last couple years. Last year, we were unable to fill 5 positions because we were unable to find the people to fill the positions for whatever reason. This year, 5 positions again. So I would hope that if we're talking about staff reductions or anything to do with staff, well, first, I would have been aware because, right, I oversee that. But 2, also, we could have got together at department heads to come up with a strategy on how to implement that. Because it's unfortunate, I'm gonna get people, employees coming to my office at the end of this meeting, and they're gonna be anxious. What is going on with my position? What do I do? Where do I go? And nobody likes to be anxious about their livelihood, okay? So I'm standing here and I'm getting emotional because I feel for these people. I can appreciate where they're coming from. So if you're looking at a staffing strategy, I ask that 1, you put a hiring freeze immediately and we start there. And then we stop and pause, and then let's go from there. But don't make, please, any emotional decisions on staffing as it stands here today without additional conversation. Questions for me?
Anybody have any questions for Julia?
Julia, you had some information concerning unfilled positions. Last year, we had how many applicants apply for how many positions and compared to this year?
Yep. Last year, we had 27 open positions. We had 607 applicants. As of today, we have posted 27 positions as well, and we're down to 433 applicants total. So we're down 200 applicants.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience want to come up? Any discussion amongst the commission? I'd like to circle back to former Commissioner Dave Gillespie. He indicated $4,000 could come out of the soil conservation budget. Can we get a motion on that, please? Thank you. Thank you. Sherry, we call the roll?
Commissioner Aaron's? Yes. Commissioner Poppins?
No?
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. The motion carries. Are there any other motions regarding the budget? Cuts or otherwise?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner?
as we've listened patiently to what are desires on the part of commissioners, and I don't think there's any commissioner up here that wants to necessarily raise taxes. However, to be said that we were not frugal over the past years, I think that the historical evidence presented that wouldn't agree. We did have reserves. The thing that concerns me is what about our future? I mean, it's just not going to end. 10 years from now, this commission could very well, or this county could very well be bumping up to 100,000 people. And what we do now is we have to make some hard decisions, granted. But on the other hand, we got to inform the public that this is real. These services are real. Are we prepared to put a treasurer's office with 4 windows open and a growing population, and people just can't understand why the heck we can't grow? I think Ernest had a good point. When people look around and they see the buildings, they see the commercial, they see all the growth that this county is going, and it's not going to stop. And they ask the questions, well, why don't you have enough money? Well, we can explain that. That cost money continues to grow up. We have a sheriff's department that has worked very hard to lower crime. And are we willing to go back now and allow that to happen? We brought our assessor up to speed so that we are now in compliance. Are we to go back to where we were before? It seems to me that we have this simple question: are we willing to look at and move forward today with the budget that is in front of us and begin in earnest now, next year, taking a look at those priorities that we have and what cuts we can make, more efficiencies that you have said? Those are all good ideas. I don't disagree with any of them. But I think right now is not the time for us to move backwards. I think we got to think about the human costs. And I know, Julia, you mentioned that. I just, when people sit in their office today wondering if they're going to have a job tomorrow, their efficiency goes way down. I take great responsibility in that. I look at that as much as I do to saying whether I'm going to hold the line on X amount of cuts or whatever it is. I'm not saying that we won't. I'm not saying that we can't. I'm just saying that right now we're facing this situation, and I think it's time for us to cut bait and make that decision.
Can you, one of the speakers brought up a 4-H program and called it, I think, a sacred cow. And do you have any comments about that? Is that something we should look at cutting?
That's our future, our next generation that's going to be residing and running this county. The individuals that are operating the 4-H facilities are doing their effort to build the facilities out there. The county stepped up, took the opportunity to prepare that for the future, but that it's their entity that is creating the future and the structures that are getting built.
I was at the 4-H meeting last night, and I saw dedicated people give their time and their talents and are working very, very hard to provide for our youth the best possible experience on 4-H. I wouldn't want to go to them and tell them that, we no longer support what you're doing, or that the future that we provided for you isn't good. I agree with Commissioner Poppins. I want to invest in the future. I want to invest in kids, because if you put kids and you give them something to work on, they don't have other activities that can lead to things where they have to visit with the sheriff's department. I'd rather go on record as supporting the kids and what their efforts are, rather than the other activities that we've talked about. Madam Chair, how much longer do we want to sit? Because I don't know that we've changed anybody's mind. Everybody seems to be dug in pretty deep into what they want. I'm saying we've had our budget. We've talked about $1.7 million worth of cuts already. We've heard the fact that every department will have to decimate their staff to the standpoint of not even being able to be holding the line to where they are today, but probably will regress back to where they back a few years ago.
So I've asked for a motion on the budget, so I guess I'd consider a motion to approve the budget with that extra $4,000 out of the soil and conservation that we voted on.
Madam Chair, I will make that motion to approve the budget as we have, as our auditor has presented it to us today.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion and vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, we call the vote, please.
Commissioner Aaron's? No. Commissioner Poppins?
Abstain.
Commissioner Gibbon?
No.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Any alternative motions? We can sit here all day. Something's got to happen.
Yep.
People that are voting no, what do you want changed? Make a motion. Yep, you can come on up. Since there's not a motion pending, go for it.
Just to try to make progress. And we've talked about a cut of a 9% and an 18%, so that you guys are trying to do something, and I understand that you don't want to do cuts. Maybe just make a suggestion of take a straight 10%, and things can be dealt with. I've had to take pay cuts. There's times I don't get pay raises annually. I know the state done it. They froze budgets, but then they came back and made up for it afterwards. I know for my personal, I have to live within the means that I have. If I can't afford something, I don't get it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that. I think the point that I have is I simply won't do a across the board without having these departments have an idea of where it is that they can cut. some departments have fixed costs that are outside of their control. So across the board cut, in my mind, is not acceptable.
Are there any alternative motions regarding any individual, specific budget line item?
Commissioner Gibbon, I got a question for you. If we run out.
Can you use the microphone, Joe, please?
Sorry, if we run out of money in 2024 and we no longer have cash applied to apply to our budget, what are we gonna do then?
That's a good point.
That's why we're having the conversation today.
And what if people don't approve a tax increase?
So then they'll know what the consequences will be. We've had that conversation today.
Madam Auditor, do you have projected, reserves if, based on our past revenues and expenses?
If you'll go up 3 slides on that. Right, go down 1. 1 more. Keep going. Right there. I mean, if you can see that there hasn't been much of a change in cash.
So would you be expecting to be where we are now with what we have in reserves?
So as we move forward, the sheriff, for one, has brought additional income into the county that, for resources that we've never explored before. The treasurer is looking at resources to bring additional funds into the county. The DOE is looking for additional revenue sources. We've done additional revenue sources over the last, 2-3 years to continue to pay for services that aren't necessarily, that they are optional. You know, if we continue to look at the fee structures that we have at planning and zoning, is that would be a benefit. If you know, there's all kinds of fee structures that we can look. I don't think that, I worry about where the reserves are gonna go, and I know that over the last, 3-4 years, we've heard that we're running out of cash and nothing has been done, but today, now it needs to be done. We haven't looked at any other resources for getting revenue. We just keep pushing it off till the next year.
Madam Auditor, comment if I may. I think a significant difference on this year's budget over the past years, we truly have scrutinized to much more detail in individual budgets. So some refer to it as fluff in the past. It was having the funds there if they were needed. I don't know that there's anybody in this courthouse system that will say that, man, if there's something that pops up, I've got that resource there now. It's all been accounted for that's gonna get spent.
Right, because I mean, we've even went as far as budgeting for overtime, where we weren't budgeting for overtime before. We were just, I don't know, I'm not gonna say for sure. I think there might have been some departments that were just putting a number in there, not knowing how to budget for it, and hoping for the best. So we've got a control on some of those things, so that if they go over their overtime budget, if they go over their part-time budget, which has never been separated before, they'll have to answer to you.
And a
conservative.
significant difference for the public's audience is we're in different times. Wages, you know, we're getting less applicants applying for positions. The salaries that we're having to pay to recruit and or maintain individuals are increasing substantially. Our court costs, our incarceration costs are exploding. It's finally at a point where we're sitting in the seat and the demands are outpacing the resources that we're having in the future. And we truly in the past been able to say, okay, we're comfortable because we we know in the end, we won't spend as much and somehow there'll be more revenue. We're at a point in time where I can't sit in this seat and say that's going to be the case in the coming years.
Does anybody have any other questions for the auditor?
If you don't mind, I'd like to make a small comment.
Go ahead.
And I don't mean this offensively to any of the commissioners, but the department heads, they go through and they set their budget, and they are tight as they can be on it. And then the commission comes in and makes changes to what they want on their budget. Whether they say, oh, now it's okay in March to have this employee, or they say, oh, we need to buy this for whatever reason. So trying to tell the department heads to be more conservative when they are at their very bottom dollar, I think a reflection might need to be done rather than pushing it off on department heads that are already micromanaged down their budget as far as they can. But that's just my opinion.
And it's well taken. I agree. So we can all sit here and stare at these budget sheets.
Madam Chair.
What do you guys want to do? Make some
Madam Chair,
decisions.
given that had nothing else has been proposed, I will move that we pass this budget with the $4,000 reduction.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a motion, second, I'm sorry. Any further discussion? If not, Sherry, we call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aaron's?
No.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
No.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes, motion carries.
Anything else, Madam Chair?
There is not anything else.
I would move to adjourn.
Oh.
Oh,
Can you
I would
make a
retract that.
decision on the 5-year plan,
Oh,
please?
yes,
Oh,
we do
yes,
have
thank
that.
you. Table.
All right.
Pass that or approve it, or?
I'd consider a motion to approve the 5-year plan.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And it was a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that wants to address the 5-year plan before I take the motion or vote on the motion? Nobody? All right. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aaron's?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Aaron's?
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbon?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
Yes. We're adjourned.